This is Henry Simon, bringing you another story from my files here at the Missing Persons Bureau.
In these stories of the Missing Persons Bureau, dramatized for Henry Simon by Ross Napier, names and addresses have, for obvious reasons, been changed. In one moment, the search for Anthony Atwill. Address unknown. And here again is Henry Simon.
There are many attractions for the tourists in London. Indeed, almost as many attractions as there are tourists, which is something that can be said of no other city, with, of course, the possible exception of Rome. There's Buckingham Palace itself, Clarence House, and the Palace of St. James. There's St. Paul's Cathedral and the Tower of London. There's the Old Bailey, the Law Courts, the British Museum. These to mention only a few. But of all the attractions which London offers, there would surely be none to compare for colour and splendour, for pomp and ceremony, with the changing of the guard. Perhaps the most outstanding feature of this grand old custom is the carriage of the guards themselves. Many is the time I've watched them fascinated, marvelling at their bearing, their capacity to stand at rigid attention, almost without batting an eyelid for hours at a time. Their bearskins or busbies heavy upon their foreheads, their buttons, braid, and boots flashing, be the skies grey or blue. It's a capacity I have yet to see equalled anywhere in the world, and a ceremony that can never be surpassed. Oddly enough, I've been held up in a traffic jam near Buckingham Palace, brought about by the changing of the guard, on the very morning that I was visited here in my office by Sir Robert Atwill, an old friend and fellow club member of mine, whose son I knew to be a member of the Royal Guard, and of whom, needless to say, Sir Robert was extremely proud. He was waiting for me in the outer office when I arrived, and from the look on his face, I knew at once that something was wrong.
Henry, I'm at the end of my tether. You're the one man I know who can help me.
Help you in connection with what?
Oh, my son, Anthony, he's disappeared. Disappeared completely.
I think perhaps you'd best sit down, Robert. Try to relax a little. Perhaps a brandy might help.
Oh, no. I'll be all right. Just a bit upset, you know. It's all come as rather a shock. You've met Anthony, of course?
Yes, a number of times. It must be almost 3 years since I last saw him. Let's see now. I believe it was that day he scored the century for Cambridge against Oxford. Wonderful, not that? I don't recall ever seeing 100 runs put up on that board in quicker time.
Yes, he could have played for England, that boy, if he'd put his mind to it.
Well, there's still time. He's only, 24, 25?
Henry, I don't think you can have heard what I said. I said he's disappeared. Gone.
Yes, I heard you.
Well, then, why talk about cricket? Hang it all, I mean to say.
Because you're quite obviously in a very highly agitated frame of mind. Knowing as well as I do, I realize it's quite useless trying to pry information from you while you're in such a state. Moreover, I'm doing my very best to place the boy in my own mind. Now then, just take things calmly and tell me exactly what's happened. When did he disappear, and how?
It was last week, on the Tuesday afternoon. He was on duty at the palace.
Buckingham Palace?
Yes.
And?
Shortly after 3 o'clock, he was found to be missing from his post.
By whom?
One of the constables on duty, who in turn, of course, reported it to a palace official.
He wasn't seen leaving?
Apparently not.
But surely in that uniform he couldn't very well have walked away without being spotted by someone.
Well, that's exactly what he appears to have done. Not in his uniform. His bare skin and coat were later discovered in a sentry box.
Oh.
And of course, whatever happens, it means the end of his career in the Guards. All probability he'll be court-martialed. Perhaps even put in prison.
But the boy may have suffered some form of mental lapse. He might not have been responsible for his actions.
Responsible or not, he'll be held to account for them. No excuse will be taken into consideration. And even if the court-martial's a mere formality, his dismissal will be automatic.
What steps have been taken so far by his superiors?
Oh, none so far as I know, except that he's been posted as a deserter. The matter's been hushed up as much as possible. But it wouldn't surprise me to learn that the civilian authorities have been alerted to be on the lookout for him. There's so much red tape attached to these things, it's It's quite impossible to know what course they'd adopt.
Tell me a little about the boy. Was he happy in the Guards?
He appeared to be perfectly happy.
How long has he been in the service?
2.5 years.
And his record?
This couldn't have been better.
Now, regarding his personal life, has he suffered any kind of emotional upsets of late?
Not that I know of, no. He got himself involved with some girl a few months ago, but I understood that was all over.
Now, what exactly do you mean by involved?
Well, at one point he was talking of getting engaged. I didn't take it seriously, of course. Knowing his weakness for falling in and out of love, but even so, I remember it rather shocked me at the time.
Did you meet this girl?
Yes, once. Brought her home.
Were you impressed or otherwise?
Most decidedly unimpressed. Didn't care for her in the least.
Why not?
No, she was showy, for one thing. Intensely attractive. Quite beautiful, in fact. But cheap and rather vulgar. Moreover, she drank far more than was good for her. On this particular occasion, she was 3 pounds under.
Oh, I see.
Yeah, not at all the type of girl I'd choose for a daughter-in-law.
Didn't visit you a second time?
Well, certainly not. I told Anthony if she ever set foot in the place again, there'd be the devil to pay.
Well, how did he take that?
Quite well, actually. He was rather put out himself at the way she behaved. Still, he said he didn't blame me for reacting as I did.
Did he continue to keep company with her?
He did. He kept it a secret from me. Never spoke of it again.
I see. Has there been anyone since?
Not as far as I know. Which is quite surprising, really. As I said before, this other creature appeared on the scene. He was always forever losing his heart to someone.
When did you last see him before he disappeared?
On the previous Sunday. He was off duty, and we took the opportunity of visiting the grave of his mother, God rest her.
How did he seem then?
Very quiet, subdued. In the circumstances, that was natural enough. I was the same way myself. Poor Vera. I don't think either of us have ever been the same since she died.
Must be 5 years ago now.
Almost 7. Anthony was just 18 at the time.
Have you been seeing much of him lately?
Oh, not a great deal. 2 or 3 times a month, perhaps, no more.
Relations were in no way strained between you?
Oh, not unless he was harboring a secret grudge regarding me disapproval of Felicia.
Felicia?
Yes, that was her name, Felicia Howarth.
Oh, I see. You haven't thought of checking with her at all, I suppose?
I've been so upset I haven't thought of checking with anyone. Even so, she's the last person I'd approach.
How long have they been keeping company when you met her?
2 months, perhaps not that long. But, you seem to be placing a great deal of importance on what, to my mind, was a relatively trivial affair.
Well, perhaps. It's just that in 9 cases out of 10 of this character, there's always a woman involved.
Oh, come, Henry. Surely you don't have guardsmen disappearing every other day.
The fact that Anthony's a guardsman has no bearing at all on my thoughts at the moment. I'm thinking of him simply as a young man who has, as you yourself said, a very definite susceptibility for the opposite sex.
Hang it, old man, at his age, I was much the same.
Not quite.
Eh?
If I recall correctly, at his age, you were married.
Well, I was fortunate enough to meet the right woman.
Exactly. Therein lies the difference. From what you tell me, Anthony has met the wrong one. Following Sir Robert's departure, I sent for Agent Paul Studdy, with whom I discussed the case in detail. As it happened, Studdy was also working on 2 other cases at the same time, both of them, curiously enough, involving young men in roughly the same age group as Anthony Atwill. It was, therefore, only to be expected that he should be very reluctant to take on a third.
Oh, I tell you, Chief, I'm so fed up with these young bloods and their tragic affairs, I feel like jumping off London Bridge.
Well, there's no guarantee whatever that Atwill's disappearance is connected in any sort of way with a love affair. But the indications are certainly present.
You know, I've always wanted to see one of those characters do something crazy.
What characters?
Those bearskin guys, the way they stand there like marble statues. A spaceship from Mars could land right at their feet and they wouldn't turn a hair. I've often been tempted to try tickling one in the ribs.
I wouldn't advise it if I were you. You have to find yourself behind bars very smartly.
That's why I said I'd have liked to have seen this happen. The guy suddenly whip off his coat and top knot, chuck him in the sentry box, and stroll off.
I dare say quite a number of people would have liked to have seen that happen. Fact remains, of course, that no one did. No one we know of, at any rate.
I guess he'll really have the book thrown at him when he finally turns up.
Yes, indeed. Very large book at that.
Those boys even get punished for fainting on parade, let alone strolling off and leaving the palace unattended.
Well, not unattended exactly, but less attended than usual. As I imagine he's in for quite a rap over the knuckles, whatever his excuse may be. But for the moment, of course, that's quite beside the point. Our job is to find him regardless. And I think that our best bet is to set the ball rolling by checking with this Howarth girl.
Uh-huh. Who is she exactly?
Well, from what I gather, she comes from quite a prominent family. Her father's a member of Parliament. Her mother's apparently quite closely related to a baronet.
Sounds like she might be a bit of a throwback.
Well, from Sir Robert's description of her, it does indeed. He doesn't know the family at all himself, but he knows of them. And he's heard from a reasonably reliable source that they've broken off all relations with her.
Yeah. Where does she hang out? Any idea?
He seemed to think she had a flat somewhere in Sloane Square, so I checked it in the phone book and, let's see. Oh, yes, here we are. Howarth. Miss Felicia A., 6 Aldershot Mansions, Grover Road. It was a pre-war block, not very far from Sloane Square Station. Taking a lift to the second floor, Studdy made his way along a narrow carpeted passage to a door marked 6 at the far end. In all, he knocked 4 times and was just preparing to retrace his footsteps back along the passage when the door opened and he found himself confronted by a slim young woman in a flame-colored bathrobe. Her dark hair was wet and hung limply at her shoulders. Her feet were bare, and she wore no makeup. Yet there could be no doubting that she was an uncommonly beautiful girl, despite the look of annoyance which clouded her features.
Every time I take a bath, I can count on someone arriving in the middle of it.
Pardon me, it wasn't planned.
Who are you? What do you want?
Well, the name is Studdy. I'm from the Missing Persons Bureau. If you're Felicia Howarth, I want that we should have a few brief minutes of chat.
About what?
Well, a friend of yours, Anthony Atwell.
Oh. Well, in that case, you'd better come in.
Thanks.
Well? What about Anthony?
Seen him around lately?
Not for a week or so. Why?
Because he's missing.
You don't tell me.
Uh-huh. Any idea where he might be?
Not the slightest. But when you find him, you might contact my solicitors.
Uh-huh. Why?
Because I intend suing him, that's why.
Suing him? For what?
Assault.
Henry Simon returns to continue this story in just a moment. And here again is Henry Simon.
Somewhat taken aback, Studdy stared hard at the young woman, who met his gaze unflinchingly, running a carefully manicured hand through her limp hair as she did so, the corners of her mouth registering faint amusement at the agent's obvious surprise.
You look a little shocked, Mr. Studdy.
That's putting it mildly. Assault's a pretty serious charge.
No more serious than the damage he might have done me if he hadn't been stopped when he was.
Stopped by who?
Harry Gordon, a friend of mine. We were walking along the street minding our own business when suddenly Anthony appeared in front of us. He called me a filthy name, then knocked me down. I fell on the pavement and skinned my elbow. It all happened so quickly it was over before I'd had time to draw breath. Then when Harry turned to grab him, he ran away.
Now, when was this?
Last week. Swelling in my jaw's almost gone now. But you should have seen it a few days ago.
Uh-huh. What day last week?
The Tuesday afternoon, around 3 o'clock.
And, that's when he was found missing from his post.
Well, he wasn't in uniform. Just the trousers and the boots.
Whereabouts did it happen?
In the mall. About halfway along.
Going towards the palace or away from it?
Away from it. We were actually coming from Victoria.
Uh-huh. So you did pass the palace?
Yes.
Did you happen to see Atwell on guard?
Well, I wasn't looking for him.
Obviously, he saw you.
Well, the next time he sees me, it'll be in court.
You and he were pretty chummy at one stage, weren't you?
We went out a bit together, yes.
When was the last time?
Oh, 2, perhaps 3 weeks ago.
Were you seeing each other regularly before that?
Every day.
Now, according to his father, he broke things off with you a couple of months back.
That old fogey wouldn't know what year it was.
You weren't engaged to be married by any chance?
Why do you ask that?
Just curious.
Well, as a matter of fact, we were. We kept it quiet from the old boy, but I was wearing his ring for over 3 months.
Up till the time he beat you up?
I'd taken it off a week or so before.
Why?
Oh, he began to bore me. I decided I didn't want to get married after all.
And you returned the ring?
No, I hadn't got around to it.
But you had broken the engagement.
Oh, more or less. It was sort of up in the air.
And meanwhile, you were going around with this Harry Gordon, huh?
Harry and 1 or 2 others. I always did enjoy variety.
I guess you realize you probably wrecked Atwell's life?
Oh, you're breaking my heart.
Well, I guess that's something anyway.
What?
I was beginning to wonder if you had one.
It transpired that prior to his taking an interest in Miss Howarth, Harry Gordon had been a friend of our quarry's for many years, and was known to Sir Robert as quite a decent and reliable young man. This description was duly found to be apt enough when Studdy visited Gordon in his Curzon Street apartment that same evening. Tall and well-built, with wavy fair hair, he proved to be both friendly and polite.
Please, Mr. Studdy, when you speak of my association with Felicia, I'd be obliged if you do so in the past tense. I haven't seen her since the day of the trouble with Anthony, and I have no intention of contacting her again.
Yeah. How long were you keeping company?
Oh, a few weeks.
While she was still engaged to Atwell?
I knew nothing about that. She took care not to let me see any ring.
But you knew she was going steady with him.
Oh, vaguely, yes. But, well, I got tangled up with her without quite realizing it.
Now it's all over, eh?
Completely.
Because of the trouble with Atwell?
Oh, that really showed her up in her true light.
I'd kind of like to hear your version of that story. What happened exactly?
Well, I'd arranged to meet her at a pub over in Victoria around 2. When I got there, she was tight, and she insisted on having a few more drinks.
Yeah.
Well, then she suggested we walk back to town to give her a chance to sober up. I didn't know what a game was then, but I soon found out. You see, we had to go past Buckingham Palace, and Anthony was standing guard at the front gate. Well, she must have known he was there, because she made a point of going right by him. Well, directly I spotted him, I tried to get her away, and that's when she turned on her act. She suddenly grabbed hold of me and started kissing me right in front of him. Well, apart from anything else, I've never been so embarrassed.
Yeah.
I just grabbed her by the arm, propelled her across the street, and set off along the mall as fast as I could walk. Well, by this time, she was laughing and singing at the top of her voice. I tried to hail a cab, but there wasn't a vacant one to be had. Well, we must have been about 100 yards along from St. James's Palace, when suddenly Anthony bore down on us. His face was white with rage, and he was trembling all over. He said he was going to take her home, but the moment he touched her arm, she started spitting like a wildcat. Then she tried to kick him, lost her balance, and fell in the gutter. Well, for a second or two, he just stood there, looking down at her, and she was screaming and swearing at him for all she was worth. Then he turned on his heel and walked away. The last I saw of him, he was heading across the park, and that's when I finally managed to get a cab. So I bundled her in and told the cabbie where to drop her. And that's the whole story.
Yeah. According to her, Atwell knocked her down. She says she intends to sue.
Just let her try. I'll be the first to get up and tell the court what really happened.
You know, I don't get the point of it. Why would she want to pull a stunt like that?
I wouldn't know. Frankly, at the time, I think she was too drunk to know herself.
Yeah. Well, if it was her intention to ruin the guy, she did a mighty fine job. Even as things stand, he's in one heck of a mess. But when this gets out, he'll be finished for good.
Returning to the office, Studdy reported his progress, if such it could be called. In reality, we were no further advanced than we had been before. Indeed, we were a good deal worse off, because we'd exhausted our only leads and had nothing at all to show for them. In view of this, we had no option except to push the case to one side in favor of other, more fruitful investigations. It was purely a temporary shelving in the absence of pertinent information, but it was difficult for me to explain this to Sir Robert, who appeared to be of the belief that we were abandoning the search altogether. As it happened, the case was opened abruptly some 2 days later, when, shortly before 5 in the afternoon, Studdy received a phone call.
Yes, Missing Persons Bureau, Studdy speaking.
Felicia Howard here, Mr. Studdy.
Oh? And to what do I owe this doubtful honor?
Would you come over right away?
Over where?
To my flat.
Why?
Because I'm scared. When I got home earlier, the caretaker told me a man phoned this morning wanting to know where I was. Apparently, he'd rung my flat and couldn't get an answer.
So?
He wouldn't leave his name, said he'd call back.
Uh-huh.
Well, I'd only been in about 20 minutes. The phone rang, I answered it, and the line went dead. There was someone at the other end, I know that. They hung up in my ear. I think it was Anthony, Mr. Studdy, checking to see if I was home. I think he's on his way here now.
So you want me to come over and protect you, huh, in case he gets violent?
I phoned Harry Gordon, but he wouldn't come, the low-down swine. It's all his fault anyway. He's to blame for the whole thing. And he has the height to say he hopes Anthony wrings my neck.
Who is it?
The big bad wolf. Now open up or I'll huff and I'll puff.
Just a moment. Oh, Mr. Studdy, I'm so glad you've come. I've been sitting here waiting, scared sick. There's no one I can turn to now, only you.
If you're the wronged party in this deal, as you claim, how come you're so squeamish?
I've been thinking things over. He's quite mad. He must be. When you came here before, there was something I didn't tell you.
I figured there might be.
When he found out about Harry, we had a dreadful scene. He told me if he ever caught us together, he'd kill me.
This was before the other business?
The previous evening.
Yet you deliberately went out of your way to let him see you crawling all over the guy in public.
I've been stewing about it. I had too much to drink. I didn't know what I was doing. I just wanted to show him I wasn't bothered by his threats, that I'd do as I chose.
You're bothered plenty now.
Wouldn't you be if you were in my shoes?
Beautiful. If I was in your shoes, I'd cut off my feet.
Oh, please, Mr. Studdy, don't joke. I'm telling you, he's out of his mind.
Well, he hasn't shown up yet. Maybe he's not.
That'll be him now.
Soon see. Well, hi, Gordon.
Harry, what are you doing here?
You invited me, remember?
You said you wouldn't come.
That was 2 hours ago. I've had time to change my mind.
You look pretty shaken. Something wrong?
After Felicia phoned me, I rang Sir Robert and told him about the mysterious phone calls she'd received. I thought he might like to know in case Anthony did show up.
Yeah?
It wasn't Anthony who rang. It was the old chap himself. He wanted to ask her if she'd heard anything, but when he heard her voice on the other end of the line, he couldn't bring himself to talk to her. So he hung up.
You mean it was that old fool all the time?
That's right. He phoned this morning, and you weren't in, so he spoke to the caretaker. Then he called back this afternoon.
And to think I've been worrying myself silly.
You've a lot more than that to worry about.
What do you mean?
It came over the radio, not half an hour ago.
Over the radio?
A news bulletin. At 3:20 this afternoon, the body of a man was pulled out of the river. It was estimated by a police doctor that he'd been in the water for at least a week. He carried no identification, but it didn't take them long to trace him. The clothes he was wearing, the boots, part of a uniform.
Oh, no.
The uniform of the Royal Guard.
Henry Simon returns to conclude this story in just a moment. And here again is Henry Simon.
The body of Anthony Atwill was formally identified by his father, and at the subsequent coroner's inquest, in the absence of proof to the contrary, a verdict of accidental death was recorded. It is not known just when Anthony Atwill died, but it is presumed that he entered the river within a matter of hours following his encounter with Felicia Howarth and Harry Gordon. A tragic fate for a young man with so promising a future, and brought about solely by the vicious spite of the woman he loved. And now, this is Henry Simon, as always, inviting you to meet me here again, and for the present, bidding you au revoir. This is Henry Simon, bringing you another story from my files here at the Missing Persons Bureau.
In these stories of the Missing Persons Bureau, dramatized for Henry Simon by Ross Napier, names and addresses have, for obvious reasons, been changed. In one moment, the search for Charlie Porter, address unknown. And here again is Henry Simon.
When Charlie Porter decided to take up boxing as a career, he was still selling newspapers in the Tottenham Court Road. But he'd been told by those who'd seen him participating in amateur bouts that he had a very great fistic future in store. Even so, he was determined not to let it go to his head. So he continued to sell his newspapers right up until the time he won his third professional bout in 1949. It was soon after this that he teamed up with a fight manager named Joshua Lawrence, who guided him steadily up the ladder of the preliminary ranks, finally securing him a supporting bout to a championship fight at the Haringey Stadium. Luck was against him, however, and in the second round his opponent swung a wild punch that lifted Charlie clean off his feet and put him back in his dressing room in a very dazed state of mind.
I didn't even see it coming, Josh. I was all set to finish him off, and I didn't even see it coming.
Oh, relax, Charlie boy. It was a lucky punch, that's all.
But I didn't even see it coming. If only I'd seen it coming, I'd have been all right. If only I'd seen it coming.
You just forget about it. It'll be a different story next time.
Oh, yeah. Yeah, different story. Funny thing, though, I didn't even see it coming.
As fate would have it, that punch was not the last that Charlie didn't see coming. In his next 18 bouts, stretching over a period of almost 3 years, he took the count 15 times. And in the remaining 3 only managed to stay on his feet because his opponent was either too old or too tired to administer the coup de grace. Then came that eventful eve in the August of 1954, when Charlie Porter graced the Hempen Square for the last time. He was back at the bottom of the bill, and he wouldn't have been there except for the fact he was called as a last-minute substitute. For 4 rounds, he was mercilessly battered by a fusillade of punches, none of which he saw coming, but all of which took their toll, until at length, early in the 5th round, he sank to his knees. He tried to rise, but his legs refused to function. And with the crowd's derision echoing in his ears, Charlie Porter took his final count.
I couldn't get up, Josh. I tried, but I just couldn't.
How'd you feel?
Okay. Bit woozy up top, but okay.
Well, this time I really mean it.
What?
You're through, Charlie. Finished.
Oh, now, Josh,
I'm not arguing with you. You've taken too many beatings. I aim to see you don't take any more.
But I'm fit, I'll tell you. I'm as fit as ever I was.
No, you're not, kid. You're in bad shape. I didn't realise till tonight just how bad. You wandered around that ring like a man in a dream, letting Hogan hit you as he pleased. I looked for all the world like you couldn't even see him.
Oh, it was just I had a headache.
You always got a headache these days, and it's small wonder. Tomorrow morning you're going to see the doc and have a thorough checkup.
If he says I'm okay, will you let me go on fighting?
I told you no.
Oh, please, Josh, you know how much it means to me. It's my whole life.
Oh, think about it. But only if he gives you a perfect bill of health.
Oh, he will. Like I keep telling you, I'm as fit as ever I was.
All right, Charlie, you can come back in now.
Thanks, Doc. Did you check the X-rays?
Yes, I checked them.
Well, what's the verdict?
You a married man, Charlie?
No, sir. Oh, there'll be time enough for that when I retire from the ring. I've got to make me name first.
We can't all make the top, son.
Oh, I'll get there. I've just had a runabout, that's all.
Tell me, what's your mother think about you fighting for a living?
I haven't got a mother, sir. She died when I was a baby.
Oh. Father?
Well, no family at all.
No close relatives.
Well, not that I know of. You see, I was raised in an orphanage, but why all the questions?
Oh, just curious. I'm afraid Josh was right, Charlie. Your fighting days are over.
Ah, you're kidding me, Doc.
Only wish I were.
But there's nothing the matter with me. I feel great. And if those X-rays say any different, they're wrong.
How about that headache?
Well, it's still there a little, but it's better than it was.
I'm sorry, Charlie. I can't pass you.
Now, Doc, you've got to. Look, what do I have to do to prove I'm okay? I'll do anything you want, anything, if you'll only...
You're beating your head against a wall, son. There's nothing you or anyone else can do to prove you're fit when you're not.
But what's wrong with me?
To put it in 3 short words, too many punches.
I'll go to another doctor. I'll even get myself another manager if I have to. Nobody's going to stop me fighting. Nobody. Jer?
Charlie, you can go to a dozen other doctors and find yourself twice as many more managers. But it won't make any difference. You should know that where the boxing authorities are concerned, my word is law. If I say you're out, you're out. That's all there is to it. You've taken your last licking, son. You'll never fight again.
You want to see me, Doc?
Sit down, Josh.
Where's Charlie?
He's gone.
I was supposed to meet him here.
He told me to tell you he couldn't wait.
And from that and your expression, I take it the X-rays didn't come out so good.
You should have made him quit a long time ago.
You think I didn't try? Doc, that kid's like my own son. I'd do anything in the world for him.
Oh, I know you would, Josh. That's the whole trouble. You've done too much. By letting him have his own way, by being soft with him, you've done more damage than you'll ever know. You let sentiment warp your judgment. And in this business, that's a fatal mistake.
Give it to me straight, Doc. What's wrong with him?
He's got a brain tumor.
Is that as bad as it sounds?
Couldn't be much worse.
Did you tell him?
I thought I'd leave that to you. All I told him was he had to quit. He took it very badly.
Can anything be done?
If he's operated on immediately, there's a faint chance.
And if not?
He'll be dead inside a month.
Cleveland Private Hotel.
Hello. Is Charlie Porter there?
No, I'm sorry, he just left.
When did you expect him back?
We don't. He's moved out.
What?
Just a few minutes ago. Who is it calling?
Josh Lawrence, his manager.
Oh, yes. Yes, he left a message for you, Mr. Lawrence. Have it here at the desk. Would you like me to read it out?
Please.
It's just a few lines scribbled on the back of an envelope. Dear Josh, I'm going away. I don't know where, but the doc says I'm through with fighting, so it doesn't really matter. I probably won't see you again, but I'll never forget all the good turns you've done for me. Thanks for everything, Charlie.
For the Missing Persons Bureau, the case of Charlie Porter had its beginning 2 days later, when I was visited here in my office by Joshua Lawrence, who acquainted me with the facts as I presented them to you.
He's dying, Mr. Simon, and he doesn't know it. Only an operation can save him, even that's 100 to 1 against. But there's a chance. There's a chance he'll come through if he's operated on right away. And that means in the next few days.
Doesn't give us long.
You've got to find him, Mr. Simon. I'll pay whatever you want. Just find him, that's all.
I take it you've already made certain inquiries.
I've looked everywhere and checked with everyone I can think of. But for all the progress I've made, I could have saved me time. No one's seen him. No one's heard from him. He's just disappeared.
How's he placed for money?
We can't have more than a few pounds. 10, perhaps. 15 at the outside.
It won't take him far.
He doesn't have to. In London, he could bury himself in any one of a million places.
Right. He had rooms in Hammersmith, you say?
He was at a private hotel, the Cleveland, Essex Road.
And he left this message with the proprietor.
Yes. I don't blame him for not wanting to see me again. This whole thing's my fault. If I'd made him quit 12 months ago, it'd be okay.
He's not aware of that, though, is he? What I mean is he can scarcely blame you for something about which he knows nothing.
Well, that's a fat consolation.
You've been his manager since 1949.
I've been a father and mother to him. At least I've tried to be. As a fighter, he hasn't been worth a peanut since he lost that sport bout at Haringey. One punch and it wrecked his whole career. I wouldn't have believed it if I hadn't seen it happen. If I hadn't stood by and watched him being slowly chopped to ribbons by fellows who had whipped him with both arms tied behind their backs. Just like that, his timing left him. His speed, his concentration, everything. All because of one rotten Sunday punch. That's when he should have got out there and then. But how was I to know? Before that, the kid had a future, a big one. Another year, he'd been on top. But instead, what happens? He takes a nosedive and winds up with his brain scrambled.
The luck of the game. Isn't that what they say?
Don't talk to me about luck. So help me, if that kid dies,
There's little to be achieved by blaming yourself.
Who else can I blame? I let him go on, didn't I? I let him beat him to a pulp.
He wanted to continue fighting, and because he wanted it, you let him. It was foolish of you, even more foolish of him. But even the wisest and the very best of us make mistakes. Oh, by the way, I don't believe you mentioned his age.
24.
Have you got a photograph of him?
I've got a whole folder full here. Old publicity stills. You can take your pick.
How long ago were these taken?
A few years. He hasn't changed much to look at, though. Got his nose broken twice, but they mended it up like new. Too bad they can't do the same with his head.
Perhaps they will, if we find him.
What are the odds, Mr. Simon? Let me have it on the chin. Do you think we...
It's quite impossible to say just now. We'll do the very best we can, and that's all I can promise.
You'll let me know if anything comes up?
Of course.
My number's on that card. You can reach me there any time.
Fine.
Look, I'm sorry I went to pieces a bit earlier. It's just that I'm pretty much on edge.
Understandably so.
I've seen this kind of thing happen a dozen times to other boys. I was in the ring myself once. Almost lost my eyesight. If I hadn't got out when I did, I'd have probably been where Charlie is today.
Henry Simon returns to continue this story in just a moment. And here again is Henry Simon.
It was a tragic business, whichever way one looked at it. Yet to a certain extent, it had been brought about by the two people involved, Joshua Lawrence and Charlie Porter themselves, who were now, so far as we were concerned, client and quarry. Accordingly, directly Lawrence had taken his leave, I sent for Agent Bob Hunter and briefed him on the various aspects of the case. As far as I can gather, Hunter, the boy seems to have spent his entire life in London. He was born and bred here, and apart from the odd country tour, he's never been further afield than Stepney. His parents are dead, he has no relatives to speak of, and outside of the boxing profession, he has very few friends.
Well, no romantic interest?
Not to Lawrence's knowledge.
It leaves us with a pretty open field, Chief.
Yeah, I'm afraid so, especially in view of the time limit.
Yeah. What about before he turned pro? How'd he make a living?
Selling newspapers. That was his other world, the world he grew up in.
Maybe he's gone back to it.
It's conceivable. See, I've made some notes here, I think.
Mm-hmm.
Yes, from the age of 14, he worked for a newsagent on the Tottenham Court Road, Donald Baker. He was still employed there when Lawrence first met him.
This Baker still in business?
Well, there's a D.L. Baker newsagent listed in the current phone directory, 142 Tottenham Court Road. I expect it's the same man.
142.
Mm-hmm.
Okay, Chief, I'll go have a talk to him and see what he knows.
At Baker's news agency, not very far from Goodge Street Tube Station in the Tottenham Court Road, Hunter sought out the proprietor, Donald Baker, a plumpish, balding man of middle age.
Charlie Porter.
That's right.
Whatever happened to that lad? Haven't heard of him in years. Not since I saw his name on the sporting bill at the Albert, or it must have been back in 51 or 52.
Oh, he hasn't get in touch?
He did for a while, when he was winning. Then he dropped a few bouts and, well, just faded out of the picture.
How long was he working for you?
Oh, let's see now. It must have been 5 or 6 years. He had a stand up on the corner of Oxford Street. Come to be a sort of home to him. Worked like a Trojan, he did, from 6 a.m. in the morning till 10 o'clock at night, except when he was fighting. I used to be an amateur then, of course.
Guess you got to know him pretty well.
Oh, about as well as anyone did. He was a nice lad. Had a good heart, you know. And no one was ever more willing. Oh, I was sorry to lose him, I can tell you.
Where was he living then?
Somewhere in Aldgate, I think. Out Painter Roadway.
I don't suppose you'd have the address.
It's probably around somewhere, I could look it up for you.
Oh, if it's not too much trouble, I'd sure appreciate it.
I'll have to go upstairs, though. I'll just ring for the wife, have her mind the shop while I'm gone. Sorry to keep you so long. Got so much junk up there, I can never find anything when I want it.
That's okay. Any luck?
Yep, for what it's worth. Yeah, so here it is. Charlie Porter, Jeremy's T. Hollis, 221 Fowler Street, Aldgate.
The Fowler Street address proved to be a decrepit lodging house in an none too savoury area. Groups of ragged children were playing games ranging from football to hopscotch in the centre of the road, which was lined by heavily laden garbage tins waiting to be emptied.
Good afternoon.
Oh, good afternoon, ma'am. Could you tell me if a Mrs. Hollis lives here?
Why, yes, I'm Mrs. Hollis.
Oh, well, I'm glad to know you. I'm Bob Hunter from the Missing Persons Bureau.
The police?
Oh, no. No, we're a private organization.
Oh, for a moment you had me worried. I thought perhaps one of my lodgers might have been in trouble.
Well, no. Actually, it is about a former lodger of yours that I've come.
Oh?
Yeah, a young fellow by the name of Charlie Porter.
Charlie?
You remember him?
I should say I do. Looked after him for long enough. Well, I was like one of my own. Till he went into that fight business. Nearly broke me heart, it did. Fine boy like that.
I take it you don't approve of fighters.
It's what they do to each other I don't approve of. Anyway, he left me not long after.
Have you seen him since?
No, had a few letters from him for a time, but... Well, I suppose he was hurt because I never went to any of his fights.
Yeah.
But what's this all about? Has he got himself in some kind of scrape?
Well, sort of. He's disappeared.
Disappeared from where?
From where he was living. And a friend of his wants to contact him urgently.
Has he retired from the ring then?
Yeah.
Oh, I'm glad. Oh, but I suppose he'll go back to it again, directly the fancy takes him.
No, he won't, Mrs. Hollis. You can rest easy on that score. He's out for good. The big problem is, well, it's vital that I reach him in the next few days. That's why I'm here. I thought perhaps you might be able to give me some kind of a lead. You know, the name of a friend he might have turned to, maybe, or someone he knew in the old days when he was selling his newspapers.
Oh, there's only one person I can think of outside of myself, and that's Mavis.
Mavis?
Mavis Denton. She and Charlie were sweethearts.
Yeah?
Till he started fighting seriously, that is. She was more against it than I was. In the end, they had a bust up. She went her way and he went his. They were so wrapped up in each other, too. It was a terrible shame.
Any notion where I could reach her?
Oh, yes. She was not far from here in Clarence Lane. You won't catch her home now, though. She works during the day.
Where?
Woolworths. Serves behind the counter.
Do you know which branch?
The one near the station. You'd have passed it on your way here.
She is still Miss Denton, is she? Or,
Oh, yes. Got herself engaged once, but it never came to anything. She's never really forgotten Charlie. Doubt she ever will.
Well, thank you very much. I guess I'll go have a chat with her.
You shouldn't have any trouble finding her. She's blonde and very pretty. Works on the electrical goods counter, just by the door as you go in.
As luck would have it, Hunter encountered Mavis Denton as she was leaving to take her tea break, and having introduced himself, persuaded her to join him for a cup of coffee at a nearby cafe.
No, Mr. Hunter, I'm sorry. Charlie and I have lost touch completely. I haven't set eyes on him since we quarrelled about his fighting. He left the district soon after that.
Well, is there anybody you could think of who might know something? You know, anyone at all he's likely to contact?
Not really. Apart from Mrs. Hollis and myself, he didn't have many close acquaintances. You say he's retired from the ring?
Yeah, that's right.
He hasn't been hurt, has he?
Oh, well, He's taken a lot of punishment over the last few years. More than that's good for anybody.
I tried to warn him, to try and talk him out of it, but he wouldn't listen. He'd been told that he had the makings of a champion, and... Well, he'd always wanted to be someone, and the temptation was just too much for him.
It's an old story. They're all going to be champions when they start off. One or two make it, but the rest, big majority of them, they wind up like Charlie, broken down punch bags.
Oh, it's so wrong. So dreadfully wrong.
Well, I guess they figure it's worth the risk.
Have you tried Bill Palmer?
Bill Palmer? Who's he?
Oh, he has a grocery store up the street. Charlie used to run errands for him when he had time off from his newspaper stand.
Uh-huh.
Occasionally they went to the football together, just the two of them. Yes, they were pretty close at one time. I know Charlie thought a lot of Bill.
Bill Palmer, up the street, huh?
About 3 blocks up on this side. Oh, there's a big green sign up out in the front. Buy your groceries here.
Oh, yes, he was quite a boy, was Charlie, Mr. Hunter. Full of beans and plenty of drive. Must say, though, it didn't get him far in the ring. Only saw him fight once. That was enough.
Uh-huh.
Yes, got the ears belted off him. Sheer murder it was. That's too bad. You know, I really thought he had it.
Yeah. You haven't heard from him at all lately, I suppose?
No, I'm afraid not. For all I know, he could be dead.
Yeah, well, if I don't find him in a hurry, he will be.
What's that?
Well, he's got to go into hospital for a brain operation. Hence the urgency.
Doesn't he know about it?
No. It's a terrible thing. He cleared out before anybody had a chance to tell him. So you can see, Mr. Palmer, how vital it is. Try and think. When he left the hotel where he was staying, he was broken up. Now, his whole world had just been shattered because he'd been told he had to give up fighting. Now, can you think, where would he go in that state of mind? Who would he turn to? Not Mrs. Hollis or Mavis Denton, and not you, but who else is there?
Yes, wait a minute. When he was a kid and things weren't too good, he always used to fall back on old Father Jeffries.
Father Jeffries?
Yes.
Priest?
Yes, priest. Charlie's a strict Catholic, you know. Brought up in a Catholic orphanage.
Is this Father Jeffries still alive, do you happen to know?
I couldn't rightly say. You see, this here used to be his parish till about 3 years ago.
Yeah.
Then he was moved out to Putney somewhere or other. You could ask at the presbytery, they'd know.
Father Jeffries?
That's right.
Why, yes, we hear from him quite often.
He's at Putney now, I understand.
Yes, St. Mary's Church in Wesley Road.
Father Jeffries proved to be a man in his early 70s, but age rested lightly on his shoulders, and he carried himself erect, his cheerful reddish face curiously free of wrinkles, his blue eyes keen and clear, and his smile broad, ready, and infectious.
I'm delighted to make your acquaintance, Mr. Hunter. Do sit down. Make yourself comfortable.
Well, thank you, Father, but I'm kind of pressed for time yet.
As you wish. But tell me, to what do I owe this pleasure?
It has to do with an old parishioner of yours, a fellow named Charlie Porter.
Charlie?
Yeah.
What about him?
Well, have you heard from him at all recently? I mean, over the past week or so?
Oh, why do you ask?
Well, it's vital that I contact him as soon as possible.
Vital to whom?
To Charlie himself. He's dying, Father, and he doesn't know it.
Dying?
Yeah, he has a brain tumor. The odds are against it, but an immediate operation might save him, so you see...
Enough said, Mr. Hunter. Come with me.
Where?
I have heard from Charlie. 4 days ago he came here, and he told me the doctor had said that he had to give up fighting, and wanted to know if I knew of any kind of job that might suit him. He always used to come to me with his woes, you know, whenever he needed guidance or a shoulder to cry on.
Well, were you able to help him as regards the job, I mean?
Well, you might have noticed we have a rather beautiful garden here, as well as a large expanse of lawn.
Yeah, I saw a guy hard at work with a mower out there.
Yes, I used to push that same mower myself and tend the garden, but I'm afraid the years are catching up with me. No longer as active as I was, nor do I have the time to devote to it that I had. And that's why I was only too happy to let someone else take over.
Well, I'm sure you were, Father, but...
And you should have taken a closer look at that man behind the mower.
Huh?
Charlie Porter, Mr. Hunter. Shall we join him?
Henry Simon returns to conclude this story in just a moment. And here again is Henry Simon.
Charlie Porter received the news that he was dying a good deal more calmly than he had the doctor's verdict that he must give up fighting. It was Father Jeffries who convinced him, finally, that he still had very much to live for, and restored in him the will to carry on. Accordingly, 3 days later, the operation took place, and thanks to the skill of a prominent London brain surgeon, it was a success. On his subsequent release from hospital, Charlie was dispatched by Joshua Lawrence to a rest home in the north of England, where he was later visited by Mavis Denton, who the following year became his wife. And so, from the very jaws of tragedy, ultimate happiness emerged. And now, this is Henry Simon, inviting you to meet me here again, and for the present, bidding you au revoir.
In one moment, the search for Christopher Adamson, address unknown.
And here again is Henry Simon.
Sometimes before in this series of programs, I've talked about the motives for disappearances. It never ceases to surprise me that not only are two cases never the same, but there are even so many basically different reasons for a person not being where he or she ought to be. Just when I feel that I've now seen everything, along comes a case which is totally different from anything that's gone before. The disappearance of Christopher Adamson was an example of what I mean. His father, George Adamson, a noted London broker, came to see me one Monday morning in June of last year. George Adamson was a worried man, a kindly one, but a worried one. He came to report that his son Chris was missing and had been for some 2 days. His weathered face was creased with anxiety as he spoke to me.
I'm desperately worried, Mr. Simon. The more so because when I last saw Chris, we parted, not on the best of terms.
There was a quarrel?
Well, hardly, but we argued. Rather acrimoniously, I'm unhappy to say.
I don't think you should reproach yourself too bitterly, Mr. Adamson. Arguments occur in the best regulated of families.
Yes, I suppose so.
What did you argue about?
Oh, it seems so trivial in retrospect, I hardly remember. In any case, I'm quite sure it's neither important nor relevant.
Your son is how old?
Chris will be 22 at the end of November.
Mm-hmm. And what does he do?
Do?
Well, he works, I take it.
Oh, I'm afraid I misunderstood you for a moment. Actually, he doesn't, not yet. You see, he's only comparatively recently come out of the Army, National Service, you know. Well, he's going to join me in Adamson and Phelps when he's settled down.
Oh, did he find National Service so unsettling?
That's not quite what I intended to imply, Mr. Simon. I felt that when Chris came out of the Army that he should have a complete rest, complete break before entering the world of commerce.
Oh, yes?
Yes, there's a great future for Chris. Of course, I had to work the business up from scratch. Chris will inherit as is.
Quite.
My partner was killed during the war. Poor Godfrey. He was a brave man. He felt the call, and he didn't shirk his duty. Only 38 when he went, poor lad.
Oh, there are no other directors of your firm?
No, just me, near retiring age, and Chris. He's a lucky boy.
He certainly sounds it.
The whole position's absolutely gilt-edged as far as Chris is concerned. However, we're getting rather away from the purpose of my visit.
Yes, you say your son's been missing since the day before yesterday.
That's right, Saturday.
At what time on Saturday did you last see him?
Just after lunch, which we had together at our home at Caterham.
Oh, that's not too far away from Bromley in Kent, is it?
That's right.
And that's when the argument occurred?
I'm afraid so. It happened actually at lunch. Chris got up and went to his room. About an hour later, I went up there to see him, to try and make amends if I could, and he wasn't there. I called out to him, but there was no answer. I suddenly felt cold and lonely, as if I knew something had happened. Even so, I didn't really worry till that night. Then I thought Chris might have gone round to see his friend Peter. I decided not to worry. I went to bed early on Saturday. It'd been a trying week. And, of course, Chris had a key. I breakfasted in bed. I always do on a Sunday. It wasn't till about 11 that I realized that Chris hadn't come in, nor was he in the house. Well, then I panicked. I rang up everybody I could think of. No luck. I didn't know what to do. And then I thought of the Missing Persons Bureau. And I felt if anybody could help me, then it was you.
I'm very flattered. How did you hear of us in the first place?
You discovered the whereabouts of a friend, Harley Cuthbertson.
Oh, yes, I remember the case well.
So, here I am.
You haven't been in touch with the police?
No.
May I inquire why? This doesn't sound like a case where possible publicity would be harmful in any way.
I'll be quite frank with you, Mr. Simon. Quite apart from the fact that I don't think this is a case for the police, the publicity which might result from consulting them could well be injurious to me.
In what way?
I've been notified that I may expect a knighthood in the birthday honours list.
Oh, congratulations.
Thank you. And naturally, I wish to avoid any possible scandal.
Yes, of course.
But I must find Chris.
Tell me, this sort of thing has never happened before?
Good heavens, no. It's completely uncharacteristic.
Well, Mr. Adamson, if you'll give me some half a dozen or so addresses, we'll see what we can do for you. After George Adamson's departure, I called in Agent Brad Farley and detailed the case to him. He listened in attentive silence. There was a long pause when I finished speaking. Then he spoke.
Chris Adamson. He'd be quite a catch, wouldn't he?
Meaning?
I mean, from a blackmail point of view.
Oh, he would, but I don't think it's even remotely likely. This isn't Chicago, you know.
Yeah, okay, Chief. I know it happens very rarely in England, even so.
No, it looks to me rather like a case of pique. Son, newly endowed with freedom from the army and perhaps even having attained some rank, doesn't yet feel like bowing to parental wishes.
Yeah, but from what you've told me, old Adamson seems rather a genial old stick.
Oh, yes, but even so.
Even so, it's worth considering.
I must say that when you said that Adamson would be quite a catch, I was thinking along rather different lines.
Cherchez la femme?
But with rather a difference. Whilst I think that our client is 100% reliable and honest, I don't think he gave us quite the complete picture.
Well, he answered all the questions you put to him, didn't he?
Very nearly. To be more accurate, he answered all but one.
That one being?
The cause of the lunchtime quarrel between himself and his son.
Oh.
The quarrel which took place immediately before Christopher Adamson's disappearance.
Uh-huh.
When I questioned Mr. Adamson Sr., he simply said something to the effect that it had, well, no bearing on the case.
And that was the only question that he didn't answer?
Yes. But then I didn't ask all the questions.
Oh, why not?
I didn't want to do all your work for you, did I, Farley? I discussed the questions which I'd left unasked at some length with Farley. He was all for heading straight for Waltham, but I dissuaded him. I felt that as Chris Adamson's close friend Peter Simpson lived nearer at hand, he might call there first.
You're Mr. Peter Simpson?
That's right.
I'm Farley, Brad Farley, Missing Persons Bureau.
Are you indeed? Well, then you must be looking for Chris, right?
Check.
I've been away for the weekend, but my mother told me when I came in that Mr. Adamson had been on the telephone. What's it all about?
That's what I'm trying to find out. You were in the army with Christopher Adamson, right?
That's right. We were both in the signals.
Can you think of any reason for him having gone off like this?
No, I can't. But supposing he hasn't just gone off, supposing he's been kidnapped.
Yeah, that thought occurred to me. But it's not very likely. At least I'm told it isn't.
Well, he's quite a catch.
Yeah, something tells me I've been here before. Look, what about girlfriends, huh?
Mine or his?
His.
Norma O'Brien. Smasher. Nightclub hostess.
Oh, that sounds promising.
You should see her.
I intend doing just that. By the way, does the old man approve?
I don't really know that he's in the picture.
Oh?
And if you're seeing him, I don't think I should mention it. Actually, I'm sure he wouldn't approve, although he'd be very nice about it. He is very nice.
Yeah, so everybody keeps telling me. Whereabouts this Norma O'Brien, Raymond?
Yes. Irish blood somewhere back down the line. I don't know where she lives, but she works every night at the Blue Feather off Forsyth Street.
Oh, yeah, I know it.
Do you think she's mixed up in all this?
Could be. She'd at least supply a motive of sorts.
Well, anything else I can tell you?
Not just a moment, no, but don't run away. I'll be back.
As the Blue Feather is a late nightclub, Farley decided to pay his visit to client before combining business and pleasure later in the evening. It was mid-afternoon when he reached Caterham in Surrey. He found the Adamson country house without too much trouble, and George Adamson was in and would see him at once.
Please sit down, Mr. Farley. Mr. Simon told me I could expect a call from you.
Thank you.
Is it too early to ask whether you have any news for me?
I'm afraid it is, yeah. I can take it from that your son hasn't put in an appearance since you spoke to Mr. Simon, and that you haven't heard from him, right?
I've heard nothing. I'd have notified you immediately if I had. I'm wondering if I should have called in the police.
Well, give us at least 24 hours, Mr. Adamson.
Yes, of course, I'm sorry. But I really am so terribly worried.
Yeah, well, there are just 3 questions I'd like to ask you, sir.
Yes, of course, anything.
Well, first of all, what about your son's girlfriends?
Well, I don't think he has any. Not steady ones, that is. Oh, he dated a number of pretty girls like any other young man of his age. But I don't think any more than once or twice at the most. What's your second question?
You told Mr. Simon that you couldn't think of any reason why his son should leave home voluntarily. You haven't thought of any reason since you left our office?
No, I haven't. I did tell Mr. Simon we'd had a bit of an argument on Saturday, though. Although I think that was hardly a motive for Chris to leave home.
Well, that brings me to the third question. What was the argument about?
Well, I did also say to Mr. Simon that couldn't possibly have anything to do with the case.
Yeah, I know you did, sir, but would you let me be the judge? Rest assured that anything you say to me will be treated as being in the strictest confidence.
Well, if you must know, we talked about money.
Oh. Funnily enough, that was another thing I was going to ask you. How does your son manage for money if he's not yet earning?
Well, he receives an allowance, of course. A more than adequate allowance. Also, is a small amount of savings under a compulsory army savings scheme. However, I don't think there's much of that left.
Well, then why did you quarrel about money?
Simply because he wanted me to invest money in a scheme which was neither practical nor desirable. I told him so, and he was upset. It wasn't the first time he brought the matter up. However, this time, I'm afraid he lost his temper, and things were said which, frankly, should not be said between father and son.
I see, yeah.
Were there any other questions, Mr. Farley?
Not right now, sir, but there will be later. And though he appeared to tell me more than he told you, Chief, now I come to analyze it, I don't think he did.
Well, at least you got the fact that the quarrel, which seems to loom all-important, was over money to be invested.
Yeah, sure, but it doesn't tell us much.
Not about our missing person, no, but it does tell us a little about client.
Mm-hmm.
He's got a lot of money, that much is obvious. Yet he begrudges an investment advised by his son and heir. Now, why?
Mrs. Hartley left about 5 minutes ago. She put the phone through.
Missing Persons Bureau?
Could I speak to Mr. Simon, please?
Speaking.
Oh, Mr. Simon, I was hoping I'd catch you. It's George Adamson here. Chris is all right.
What?
Yes, he's safe, but we must stop looking for him.
I don't quite understand.
I just had a note. It came in the 5:30 delivery. It's from the kidnappers.
Henry Simon returns to continue this story in just a moment. You are listening to The Colgate Show, Address Unknown.
And here again is Henry Simon.
I must admit the news staggered me. Farley had mentioned the possibility of blackmail, but kidnapping was not even considered. Would you mind repeating that, Mr. Adamson?
I received a note from Chris's kidnappers. It arrived not 2 minutes ago.
Well, do you mind reading it to me?
Well, it does say that any search in progress must be called off.
Does it specifically say that you mustn't divulge its contents?
No.
Good. Then will you please read it to me?
It says, if you want to see your son again, you go to your bank first thing in the morning and get £10,000 in small denomination notes, used ones. When you get back to your house with the money, there will be a further communication. Your son is well, and he'll stay well so long as you follow out these instructions and also call off any search you may have instigated.
Well, at least they're literate. Is the note written or typed?
Looks like separate words cut out from newspapers.
It would be. What are you going to do?
I'm going to follow the instructions to the letter. £10,000 won't break me. The kidnappers had known me better, they'd have asked for more. I felt from the start that it was a case of kidnapping. My immediate feeling is one of relief.
Yes, I can understand that. You can rely on us to do nothing which might jeopardize your son's safety.
Well, I'm very glad you agreed to call off the investigation.
That's not quite what I said, Mr. Adamson. I said I'd do nothing to jeopardize your son's position, and I mean just that. However, there's one thing you can do for me, if you will.
What's that, Mr. Simon?
Please phone me after the kidnappers have contacted you tomorrow morning.
Do you think that's wise?
Mr. Adamson, this is not America. Your phone will not be tapped. Rely on me, and please trust me. But phone me. That evening, Farley went, as arranged, to the Blue Feather. It was far from the nightclub he'd expected, being almost a washed beatnik set up. It all seemed very pleasant and wholesome. Farley arrived shortly after 9:30 and found that the floor show started at 11. The hour and a half passed very easily in the friendly atmosphere of the club. Then Norma O'Brien appeared. She sang very well. Afterwards, she joined the diners and dancers. Before long, she was sitting at Farley's table.
Well, that was quite an act, Miss O'Brien.
Thank you.
Good for the ears and bad for the blood pressure.
Thank you again. You haven't been in here before?
No, but I'd enjoy your act, however many times I heard it.
Well, that's not quite what I meant. I haven't seen you here before.
Do you know all the clients?
Pretty well.
Well, you're quite right, I am new, yeah. Still, a friend of mine comes here, and he's often talked to me about it. I've been meaning to drop in for a long time, and tonight I got round to it. I phoned Chris, but he wasn't at home, so I came on my own.
Chris?
Yeah, my friend.
What's his other name?
Oh, I thought if you'd know it, but it's Adamson.
Oh, but I know Chris Adamson very well. Very well indeed.
What a coincidence.
Yes, isn't it?
Funny, he's never mentioned knowing you.
Well, there's a reason for that.
Oh?
What's even funnier is that he's never mentioned you to me.
Yeah, well, will he be in tonight, do you know?
Not tonight. At least I shouldn't think so. But how would I know, anyway?
When I couldn't get him at home, I half expected to find him already here.
Well, he hasn't been in, for 3 or 4 days.
Look, I've got to be pushing along. If Chris comes in later, tell him I was here, will you? There was something I wanted to see him about, something rather important.
I'll tell him. Don't you worry about that. I'll be sure to tell him you were here.
It was shortly after 10 the next morning when the call from Adamson Sr. came through. He sounded breathless and excited.
Mr. Simon, it's come.
A letter?
No, a phone call. Just after I got back from the bank. Almost as if they were watching the house. I think it was from a public phone box. A woman's voice.
You've got the money, haven't you?
Yes, I've just returned from the bank.
Well, listen, and listen carefully. 1 hour from now, that's at 11:15, drive your car onto the main Brighton Road. That's the A5. Just after the road bypasses Reigate, there's a little pub called the Golden Horse. You can see it quite easily from the road. A couple of 100 yards past that, the road passes over a stream. You can't miss it because there's a freshly painted white milestone. As soon as you pass the milestone, throw the bag containing the money out of the window onto the grass verge. Don't slow down. Once the money is out of the car, accelerate and drive on for another 5 miles before turning your car and drive into the house.
Well, supposing somebody sees me.
It's very unlikely there'll be anybody there at that time. But if there is, drive on for exactly 1 mile and drop it at the second milestone.
And when will my son be returned to me?
He'll be released before midday.
Is he all right?
Perfectly all right. Goodbye.
And you say the call has only just come through?
Not 2 minutes ago, Mr. Simon.
Good. You'll follow the instructions, of course.
Yes. You're not going to do anything, are you?
Rest assured, Mr. Adamson, I'm not going to do anything that will endanger your son. Goodbye. Right, Farley, we've got to work fast. We've got less than an hour, plus the time it'll take Adamson to get onto the Brighton Road. You can drive Glenn Martin's car, can't you?
Are you kidding?
They've given 2 places for him to dump the money. That means that they won't be necessarily at the first place. They'll probably follow him in another car once he passes Reigate. If there's anybody at the first place, any casual passerby, that is, it's going to be awkward. As soon as you've gone, I'm going to have a further chat with client. Just a couple of ends I want to tie up.
I thought I was going to do the tying up in Morton's car.
Oh, yes, you are. But there's still a couple of things about this case I don't quite understand.
Yeah, do I take a gun?
Somehow, I think that a gun is the last thing you'll need. Neither the police nor I approve of guns in any case. Our job is to find a missing person, not to apprehend a criminal.
Okay. Suppose if I have a long wait, I can always make myself a bow and arrow.
Mr. Adamson, there's something I want to add to what I said to you just now.
Yes?
You're not a fast driver, are you?
No.
Good. Today I want you to be particularly slow.
What are you going to do, Mr. Simon?
I'm going to give you some sound advice. You must trust me completely. I had to let you go to the bank this morning because it was quite on the cards that your movements were being watched. However, in your own home, you can't be observed. Be assured that the kidnappers don't know about your phone calls.
Supposing they've been trying to get me.
It's most unlikely. If what I think is correct, in any case, anybody could be phoning you. Now, what I want you to do is this. I want you to pack the bag that you intended filling with money with newspaper of about the same bulk.
But, Mr. Simon, they'll just take it out on Chris. I don't mind the money.
Please
really, I
trust
don't.
me. Please trust me. I'm quite certain your son will not suffer in any way. Now, please do as I say. There isn't much time. You'd better start right away.
Very well.
There were 2 calls to be made, both of them in London. I left instructions with Mrs. Hartley and set out on the first. Here, I drew a blank.
I'm afraid she's out, and that's rather surprising. She usually sleeps till midday. Well, I mean, if you work till the early hours, you've got to catch up and you sleep sometime, haven't you? Stands to reason. Matter of fact, I can't ever remember her getting up this early, but 8 o'clock and she was out. Crack of dawn for her.
I tracked Peter Simpson, the missing person's friend, to his office in the city. Your friend Chris Adamson, who's been missing for a few days now, needed some money for an investment.
Yes, his father wouldn't give it to him, so bang goes our chance of $1 million. Oh, if he could only have got his inheritance, then it would have been so much different for both of us.
In what way?
Well, you see, Chris's mother left him £10,000 in trust. Naturally, he thought he'd get it when he turned 21, but can you believe it? The old boy won't part. At least not until Chris is safely tied up in the firm.
And what did you want the £10,000 for?
We had first option on a garage and roadhouse in a very good position on the Brighton Road, but now Chris has disappeared, his father won't part, and the option expires tomorrow.
Henry Simon returns to conclude this story in just a moment. And here again is Henry Simon.
3 cars passed the Golden Horse on the main Brighton Road within minutes of each other that same morning. The first, Agent Martin's red sports car, driven by Farley, pulled off the road just past the milestone. Fortunately, bracken was thick enough just to provide enough cover. Hardly had Farley got himself into position than another car passed.
And here we are, right on the nose. Now we shall see what we shall see. I must say it's a bit of a temptation, all that loot lying there. Here comes the car. Well. Good morning, Miss O'Brien. Fancy meeting you here. Oh, yeah. Isn't that our missing boy, Chris Adamson, at the wheel? Guess what? My car's broken down. I wonder if you two would be kind enough to give me a lift back to town.
The curious thing was that although Chris Adamson had in fact blackmailed his own father, the money was his legitimately anyway. It was an odd situation. Odder still was the fact that it did nothing to destroy the bond between father and son. George Adamson, having received proof positive of his son's determination to carve a way for himself rather than move into a ready-made position, made no further attempts to withhold the necessary money. And now, as always, this is Henry Simon inviting you to meet me here again, and for the present, bidding you au revoir.
This is Henry Simon, bringing you another story from my files here at the Missing Persons Bureau.
In these stories of the Missing Persons Bureau, dramatized for Henry Simon by Ross Napier, names and addresses have, for obvious reasons, been changed. In one moment, the search for Colette Renoir, address unknown. And here again is Henry Simon.
Having travelled fairly extensively, I've had the opportunity of sampling the food of many different countries. And although I'm by no means a connoisseur, I like to think that I've acquired a taste for good cooking, be it French, Austrian, Italian, or what have you. It isn't my taste I wish to speak of, however, but that of a certain gentleman named Elliot, to whom good food was just as essential as the very air he breathed. Such was his claim, at least. And it was very largely because of this that he had come to rely so completely upon Colette Renoir, his cook, much to the annoyance of his wife Edna, who was more than a little jealous of Colette's prestige.
Oh, for the life of me, Elliot, I can't see why you're so captivated by that woman's cooking. I didn't enjoy my dinner a scrap.
That, my dear, it's because you have no appreciation of the finer things.
Oh, you have the gall to talk about finer things. All you ever think about your stomach.
Good food's the essence of life. More wine?
Thank you, I've had quite enough.
The perfect aid to digestion.
Sometimes I wonder why you didn't marry her instead of me.
Marry who, my dear?
Colette.
Sometimes I wonder myself.
The whole situation's so ludicrous. It's impossible to run the house in competition with another woman.
You're not required to run the house.
It seems to me I'm not required to do anything.
Many wives would consider themselves fortunate in your position.
Not if they had to put up with Colette.
You've never liked her, have you?
Neither liked nor trusted.
She's honest enough.
That's not what I meant.
You're worried she might persuade me to run off with her. Is that it?
You know as well as I do. There's nothing she'd like more than to have you to herself.
Strange. I've always looked on her as the moral type.
Moral nothing. She's French, isn't she?
True. Unfortunately, she's also fat and 50.
Oh, I'd adore her to hear you say that.
By the same token, of course. She's a good 5 years younger than you are, and quite a bit slimmer.
She has the legs of an elephant.
And you have the trunk.
Very funny.
Ah, the lady herself.
Monsieur finds your dinner satisfactory, I hope.
Colette, it was highly satisfactory. You surpassed yourself.
Oh, thank you, monsieur.
Monsieur may have enjoyed it. For my part, I thought it was abominable.
Madame?
For a start, the meat was underdone and far too highly spiced. And for another...
No notice of her, Colette. She's in one of her moods this evening. Aren't you, my dear?
If I am, it was brought on by the dinner.
I am sorry, madame. I do my best.
Your best to butter up my husband, perhaps. But your charms don't work on me.
Oh!
Ladies, please.
You hear what you say, monsieur. I am insulted.
You will apologize to Colette, my dear?
Never. What I said was the truth, and everyone knows it.
No, it is too much. Monsieur, you will accept a week's notice.
Oh, come, my little Colette. You upset yourself needlessly. Madame was joking.
I most certainly was not.
Oh, yes, you were, my dear. Or did I forget to mention that I saw a large, furry spider on the porch as I came in earlier?
Spider? Where?
Not to worry. I have him in a bottle on my desk. Now, you will apologize to Colette, won't you?
Please, Elliot, you...
Apologize to Colette?
I am sorry, Colette. As my husband says, I was joking.
Of course.
Such jokes I do not find funny.
Madame has a peculiar sense of humor. You really must forgive her.
Yeah, I forgive her. This once. But if it happens again, I go.
It won't happen again. Now, I think we might have our coffee.
Oui, monsieur. In here or in your drawing room?
In here, I think. It's a trifle warmer.
Oui, monsieur. I will bring it at once.
My dear, how often must I tell you not to torment her? One of these days she really will walk out.
If I thought that, I'd take to her with a pitchfork.
Edna, really, do try to contain yourself. These outbursts of yours are becoming most tiresome. Colette's been with us a long time. I wouldn't like to lose her.
You'd rather lose me, I suppose.
Let's just say without you, I believe I could manage to scrape along somehow. But without Colette, I'd be lost.
Elliot, is that you?
Yes, my dear.
Don't take your things off. We'll be eating out this evening.
Oh, my dear Edna, you will have your little joke, won't you?
I'm perfectly serious. You'll get no dinner here.
No? Why, Colette ill?
She seemed well enough when she left.
Left?
That's what I said.
I don't think I quite understand. Where's she gone?
I've no idea. All I know is she won't be coming back.
Won't be... What are you talking about?
I dismissed her this morning.
Dismissed her?
Yes. She insulted me, so I ordered her to leave.
But, where did she go?
I told you I don't know.
Then you'd jolly well better go and find her, hadn't you?
Oh, no. She's not coming back into this house. Not while I'm capable of lifting a finger to stop her.
We'll see about that.
You can do what you like. Put spiders in my bed, cockroaches in the bath. It won't make any difference. This once I've made up my mind.
Have you? Have you indeed?
Where are you going?
To my room. And there I intend to remain till you return with Colette.
In that case, I suggest you go out and have something to eat first. You're in for a long wait.
That's up to you, my dear. But I have no intention of eating again till you bring her back.
He meant what he said, Mr. Simon. He's been locked in his room ever since.
But I understood you to say that this was 6 days ago.
That's right.
You mean he's been there without food for 6 days?
With the door locked and bolted.
He hasn't been out at all?
Certainly not to my knowledge.
But surely...
There's a bathroom adjoining. He has plenty of water, but no food supply whatever. For the past 3 nights, I'd taken a tray up and left it at the door. But he won't touch a thing. Each time he's left it.
Incredible.
He's an incredible person.
Has he ever locked himself up or embarked upon a hunger strike before?
No. But he's done other things equally as stupid.
Oh, such as?
Well, for instance, he knows how terrified of insects and things I am.
Mm-hmm.
And if I do something that annoys him, he pays me back by putting a spider or something in my bed.
A spider in your bed?
Yes. Once he put a cockroach down the back of my dress, and he often drops them in the bath with me.
Oh.
So, you see, things like that.
He's not a violent man in any way.
Oh, no. Anything but. I don't ever recall him so much as raising his voice to me, let alone exercising any form of violence. He has other, more effective ways of getting what he wants.
And his present behavior is brought on solely by your dismissing this Colette Renoir.
Yes.
How long has she been with you?
7 years.
Oh, what prompted you to dismiss her?
She was rude to me. I lost my temper and told her to go.
I see. So she went. Now you want her back, is that it?
I have to get her back. He won't come out of that room or eat again until I do. And as much as I'd like to stick to my guns, I wouldn't like to see him do himself any harm. But the whole point of my coming to you is that I can't find Colette. I don't even know where to start looking. For that matter, she could have gone back to France.
Well, do you happen to know anything about her background? Where she lived before she entered your husband's employ? What she did?
She had a job in a Paris restaurant.
A job as a cook?
Yes. It was only a small place, but quite exclusive.
I see. But how did your husband come to meet her exactly?
To tell you the truth, I've never been too sure. He went there for dinner once or twice, to this restaurant.
Mm-hmm.
Then one evening he brought her back to the flat with him.
And she's been with you ever since?
Yes, ever since.
Were you living in Paris at the time?
Yes.
Indefinitely?
Originally, we'd planned to spend 3 months. We ended up by staying 9.
And this was in connection with your husband's business, was it?
Well, he has no business. His father left him quite a lot, in bonds and so forth. He's never had to work, not since I'd known him anyway. No, we were just staying there. For pleasure, I suppose you'd say.
He's a reasonably wealthy man, then.
Wealthy enough.
And you say that his main interest in life is food, is that it?
Definitely. It always has been.
Or did she be able to give it up altogether for so very long a time?
Oh, don't misunderstand me. He was never a big eater. Quantity doesn't interest him in the slightest. Just quality. He won't touch anything but the very best.
I see. Well, Miss Renoir must be a very fine cook.
He seems to think so.
Come in. You haven't thought of calling in the police, I suppose?
Police?
Under the circumstances, you'd be perfectly justified in so doing.
No. No, I'd rather just find Colette.
Oh, I see.
Believe me, Mr. Simon, I realize how absurd all this must seem to you. It's just that I know Elliot. I know how far he's capable of going, particularly when he makes up his mind to follow a certain course. And, well, even though I've never had a great deal of feeling for him, I can't just stand aside and let him go on like this. I tell you now, if Colette isn't found, he'll stay in that room till he drops dead of starvation.
Henry Simon returns to continue this story in just a moment. And here again is Henry Simon.
People never fail to amaze me, the things they get up to, their quirks, their idiosyncrasies. From his wife's description, Elliot Dryden was unquestionably an eccentric, a man who would do almost anything to get his own way, even to the extent of locking himself up in a room like a small child, and then going on a hunger strike. In certain respects, he bore the characteristics of a sadist, and yet in others, he bore those of a mild-mannered, docile husband. In either event, it appeared that he had to be protected from himself, and having agreed to accept the case, I duly sent for Agent Paul's study, whose reaction to the facts was very much as I'd expected.
It's like I always said, Chief. There are more people walking around the streets who ought to be in straitjackets than there are names in the phone directory.
Well, I wouldn't know much about that study, but certainly a great many people do have very peculiar tendencies.
Well, in my book, anybody who carries on like this Dryden guy is a nut. Nothing less. 6 days locked in a room without a bite to eat just because his wife sacks the cook. Oh, brother, how peculiar can you get?
Well, if all else fails, of course, the police will have to be called in to eject him forcibly. Unfortunately, they can't compel him to eat. The only person who can do that is Colette Renoir.
About whom we don't know a thing.
Except, of course, that she's French.
Oh, well, that's going to get us a long way. There can't be more than about 500,000 or so French people in this country.
Yeah, I think your best bet might be to go and question Dryden himself.
Well, how am I supposed to get to him? Break down the door?
When he learns who you are, perhaps he'll open it.
And if he doesn't?
You can always try talking through it.
Yeah, well, I think I'd rather have it that way. I don't want to take any chances of being bopped in the dome.
From what I gather, you need have no fears of meeting trouble of that nature. According to Mrs. Dryden, he's a particularly mild sort of chap.
Even so, I wouldn't want to get too close. Just in case his confinements made him savage.
Well, I'll have to leave that to your discretion. I have the address here somewhere. Oh, yes, it's Wandsworth. 72 Argyle Parade. The Drydens' home in the outer London suburb of Wandsworth was no ordinary one. 3 stories high, it was set in spacious grounds. At the back was a grassy paddock. At the front, an expansive lawn. A broad gravel drive led from the entrance gates to the house and on to a garage at the rear. At the front door, Studdy was greeted by our client, Edna Dryden, who at his request led him upstairs to her husband's room on the first floor.
Elliot, there's someone here to see you. Mr. Studdy from the Missing Persons Bureau. He wants to ask you about Colette. Elliot.
Not talking, eh?
He may be asleep.
Let's see if I can rouse him. Hey, you there, Mr. Dryden. Hello? Look, do you want this woman found or don't you?
Send my wife away.
Oh, Elliot, don't be such a fool. Come out of there and behave like
Okay, Mrs. Dryden. You better do as he says. No sense antagonizing him further.
Whatever you say. It's all so absurd, so utterly ridiculous. I'll be in the drawing room when you want me.
Right. Okay, Dryden, she's gone. You open the door, or do we talk through it?
Wait.
Oh, please come in, my dear sir. So nice of you to call.
Somewhat taken aback by the other's unexpected affability, Studdy remained for a moment standing on the threshold, as though waiting for a second invitation. In appearance, Dryden looked as normal as any man he'd ever seen. Dressed casually in a grey jumper and slacks, he was immaculately groomed and seemed to be in perfect health. With a friendly smile, he shepherded the agent to an armchair and without further ado poured 2 drinks from a whiskey decanter on the mantel.
Water or soda, old chap?
Water, thanks. Just a dash. That's fine.
Here you are.
Look, excuse the puzzled frown, but I don't get it. According to Mrs. Dryden, you've been in here for almost a week without food of any kind. Yet I come in and find you looking like you've just finished a 10-course meal. What gives?
Oh, purely a matter of constitution, old boy. But that's by the by. Oh, what's the news on Colette? You found her?
Hardly. Your wife only came to see us this morning.
Yes. I heard her phoning for an appointment. I thought you'd probably be along for a chat.
You're causing her a lot of worry. I suppose you know that.
No more than she's caused me.
Well, I've only heard her side of it, but the fact remains, she wants this Colette located. She's retained us to trace her. The big drawback is she seems to know very little about the woman, which is why I've come to you. I figured maybe you could shed some light on her background.
My dear fellow, I know very little about her myself. Other than that, before entering my employ, she lived and worked in Paris.
Uh-huh. What was the name of the restaurant she was working in there? All your wife could tell us was that it was somewhere in Montmartre.
Chez Dominique in the Place de la Gare. Probably gone out of business by this, I should think. A great deal can happen in 7 years.
Uh-huh. Well, worth checking anyway.
Look here, old chap, you're barking up the wrong tree, you know. You take my tip and forget the whole thing. I'll see you're more than compensated financially.
But I thought you wanted her found.
Oh, so I do. But, that's my wife's worry, not yours.
Your wife's paying us to do the worrying for her.
Well, whatever she's paying, I'll double it if you don't.
This gets more fantastic by the second. Do you want her traced or don't you?
She'll turn up in due course.
Meanwhile, you'll sit here and waste away to a mere 14 stone, eh?
Oh, come, my boy. Let's not be obstinate about it. I want you to drop the case.
And if I don't feel like dropping it?
I think you will.
Well, think again, mister, because I'm not just now getting tired of this case. I'm only beginning to get wound up. You might be used to getting your own way where Mrs. Dryden's concerned, but there's one big difference between her and me.
Oh?
Yeah. I'm not scared of spiders.
But it doesn't make sense, Mr. Studdy. Are you sure you didn't misunderstand him?
He offered to double what you're paying if I agreed to drop the case. Does that sound like a misunderstanding?
It's beyond me. Unless he's delirious.
Yeah, well, maybe he is at that.
All this time without food, it must have taken its toll on him.
The queer thing about it is he looks so fit. And he can't have lost that much weight. His clothes seem to fit him okay.
Some people stay much the same, regardless.
There's no way your husband could get out of this room unknown to you, is there?
Not unless he crept out at night after I was asleep.
Uh-huh. So you can't be sure he hasn't been slipping downstairs to the kitchen for a snack every night.
His room's next to mine. I'm a fairly heavy sleeper, but He couldn't be sure I wouldn't hear him. Still, I suppose it's possible. Although I haven't noticed any food missing.
Well, there's one way to find out. Tonight you'll go to bed at the usual time, and we'll see what happens.
You want me to stay awake and listen for him?
No, that won't be necessary. You just go to bed. I'll take it from there.
Accordingly, that same night, Edna Dryden retired at the customary time, shortly before 11 o'clock. From his hiding place, in a broom closet at the head of the stairs, Study had a perfectly clear view of both bedroom doors. The house was in darkness. Nothing stirred. 11:30 came. Midnight. He felt the pangs of cramp in his left leg. Cautiously, he massaged it, waiting for the minutes to pass. 1 o'clock. 1:15. And then, abruptly, came the faint sound of a key turning in a lock. The door to Dryden's room opened slowly, and a moment later a shadowy figure emerged. He was wearing a dressing gown and slippers, and he carried a torch, the beam of which probed ahead of him as he crept stealthily along toward the stairs. The agent stood stock still in the closet as the figure stole by. Down the stairs, one at a time, swiftly, silently, along the hall at the back of the house. Then the sound of another door opening. A moment's pause, closing, then the padding, slippered footsteps returning. Back along the hall, up the stairs, the same shadowy figure, in one hand the torch, in the other what looked like a large hat box tied up with string. Back past the closet, into the room, the door closed, and then silence again. Hastily, but with caution, Study emerged from the closet, went down the stairs, along the hall to the back door. Outside it was pitch dark, but his eyes had become accustomed to the darkness, and he saw her at once. A woman wheeling a bicycle toward the gate at the far end of the trackless paddock that formed the Dryden's backyard. In a second he was after her, his footsteps muted in the soft grass. She almost got to the gate when she turned and saw him. Dropping the bicycle, she started to run, but her foot struck against some unseen object, and she sprawled headlong upon the ground.
Okay, just hold it there. Here. Give me your hand.
My ankle it is twisted.
Yeah, well, that's what happens to little girls who go on midnight jaunts. Come on, get you back to the house.
No, stay away from me.
Well, if you'd rather spend the night here, that's all right by me. Study's the name, by the way.
I don't know you.
Maybe not, but I know you. Colette Renoir, isn't it not? You know, that ankle of yours is in bad shape. I'm afraid you're going to have to let me carry you.
No.
Okay, then. We'll talk here. Well?
It was all his idea. He talked me into it.
Into what? And why?
He wanted to teach her a lesson.
His wife?
Yes. She was always picking on me, making trouble. I threatened to leave if she did not let me alone, and he made her promise she will. But she does not keep this promise, and he is very angry with her. He tells me he will make her sorry for disobeying him, but that I must help him to do it.
Ah, so it was all prearranged, huh? You insult her, so she has no choice but to order you out. Then when Dryden comes home, she tells him what's happened. He turns on the big act, knowing she'll fall for it and finally be forced to eat humble pie. Knowing also that when you eventually show up again, she'll be so glad to see you, she'll change her tune towards you completely. Never step out of line again, which suited you, because you wanted the drop on her, and more than suited him, because he wanted the drop on both of you. Am I right?
I did only as I was told.
And you've been smuggling meals to him every night, huh?
Yes.
Yeah, well, small wonder he looks so fit. Where have you been hiding out all this time, anyway?
I have been staying with a girlfriend.
Far from here?
Near the station. She has a flat. I've had use of the kitchen for cooking.
Ah, so everything fitted in fine. Too bad it didn't come off.
Well, what are you going to do?
That's for Mrs. Dryden to decide. Bright Boy's had his laugh. You've had yours. The last one's hers.
Henry Simon returns to conclude this story in just a moment. And here again is Henry Simon.
An incredible story, an incredible trio. Even now, as I look at the file on Colette Renoir, I find myself wondering whether Dryden was a complete bounder or just a misguided fool. In either case, his scheme backfired to such an extent that he's going to be a very long time getting over it. Indeed, all it accomplished was the one thing it had been designed to prevent, the ultimate departure of Colette Renoir, who, upon recovering from a very badly sprained ankle, returned to Paris forthwith, and to the best of my knowledge has not been heard of since. The only one to benefit, in fact, was Mrs. Dryden herself, who at long last became mistress, that is, sole mistress, of the manor. And now, this is Henry Simon, as usual, inviting you to meet me here again, and for the present, bidding you au revoir. This is Henry Simon, bringing you another story from my files here at the Missing Persons Bureau.
In these stories of the Missing Persons Bureau, dramatized for Henry Simon by Ross Napier, names and addresses have, for obvious reasons, been changed. In one moment, the search for Cora Wakefield, address unknown. And here again is Henry Simon.
On a morning in the June of 1950, I was visited in my office here at the Missing Persons Bureau by a man named Henry Wakefield. In his late 20s, he was of medium height and build, with a chubby face and unusually large brown eyes. His voice was faintly tinged with a Cockney accent, and the index finger was missing from his left hand.
As I explained to your secretary over the phone, Mr. Simon, I'm here about my wife, Cora. She's left home, and I want her found.
I see. How long ago did she leave exactly?
It'll be 8 weeks, day after tomorrow.
8 weeks.
I know I should have come to you sooner, but, well, I was so sure she'd be back. It never struck me she might have gone for good.
How long have you been married?
7 years. I met her while I was in the army. She was working at one of the canteens. We'd only known each other a couple of weeks. It was sort of what you might call love at first sight.
Have you any children?
4. 3 girls and a boy. And the youngest is only just 2. I've got her staying with my sister, together with Janie. She's 3.
And the others?
They're at school. Albert's 5 and Judy's 6.
Mm-hmm.
I've told them their mum's sick in hospital. It's hard for them, though. They can't understand why I won't take them to see her.
Now, you say it'll be 8 weeks the day after tomorrow, which means, of course, that she left on a Thursday.
While I was at work, yes. That night, I came home, same time as usual, and found her gone.
And where were the children?
With their grandma, my mother, that is. They were spending the day with her. At least the 2 young uns were. Cora was coming into London, so she said, to do some shopping.
Did she take much with her in the way of clothing?
Not so far as I can make out.
She left no message of any kind?
Nothing.
I take it you investigated the possibility that she might have met with an accident of some kind?
There wasn't any accident. Otherwise, she wouldn't have taken the money.
What money?
We had a special hiding place under a loose floorboard in the bedroom. We kept 50 quid there for emergencies, in case something cropped up and we needed cash quick.
And she took the lot?
Yes. What's more, I know it was there the day before, because I checked it myself.
How old is your wife, Mr. Wakefield?
2 years younger than me, all but a week. 26.
So she was only 19 when you married her?
That's right.
Has she ever left home before?
No, never.
Did you have any sort of argument with her? Anything like that?
No, that's the silly part of it. We were on the best of terms. In 7 years of marriage, we'd barely had a cross word.
There were no other men in her life?
If there were, she kept them well in the background.
So you think it's unlikely that she left you for somebody else?
Well, I suppose she could have. But I can't think why she would. I've been a good husband to her, though I do say it myself. I've got a good business, I've given her everything she's wanted.
What is your business, by the way?
Carrying. I've got a fleet of 6 trucks. We take anything anywhere at any time. Started on my own with an old bitzer I bought from disposals right after the war. Never looked back since. Bought a new home down in Streatham. Washing machine, all the trimmings.
You checked with her friends and relatives, of course.
Every one I could think of. She was an only child herself, and her parents are both dead, so there's no one much on her side. As for friends, well, she doesn't have that many. Just the odd one here and there.
Have you a photograph of her at all?
Yes, I have. Just the one, but it's a good likeness.
How long ago was this taken?
Last year. We had a Sunday at Brighton. There you can see the pier in the background.
The mother of 4 children, she has a remarkably fine figure.
You should have seen it when I first met her. Regular pin-up she was.
Yes. I'll keep this if I may.
You're welcome. Just find her, that's all. Find her and bring her back home.
The disappearance of Cora Wakefield was duly investigated by Agent Paul Studdy, who spent 2 solid weeks trying to pick up some sort of trail, but without success. Finally, having made no progress whatever, he was forced to admit temporary defeat, and the case was shelved accordingly. Over the ensuing 12 months, he resumed his inquiries on 2 separate occasions, but the result remained negative, and Cora Wakefield's file was placed in a special cabinet reserved for such cases. A cabinet labeled simply, Address Unknown. It was in the October of 1956, over 6 years later, that a similar case was brought under our notice. A man's wife had disappeared, and he turned to us for help. His name was Arthur Bryant. He was 36 years of age, tall, slim, and by profession a draftsman.
She gave me no warning, Mr. Simon. No indication of any kind. She just went.
This was 6 weeks ago?
5 weeks and 4 days.
What made you wait so long before taking action?
I just kept praying she'd come back of her own accord.
I see. Now, you've been married for how many years?
5, going on 6.
Any children?
2 boys.
Of what ages?
3 and 4.
And your wife's age?
32.
Where are the children now?
With friends. I couldn't hope to cope with them myself. This chap I know and his wife offered to look after them till Gloria turned up.
I see.
It's quite fantastic, really. I can't think of any logical explanation for her leaving me. We were perfectly happy. We had no worries of any kind. We're financially secure. We have our own home. I've treated her with every possible consideration.
What were the circumstances of her departure exactly?
There weren't any to speak of. I mean, I'd just arrived home from work to find the house empty.
And the children?
She'd left them with a neighbour, Mrs. Burnett, along the street. Said she was going to town.
Did she take anything with her in the way of clothing?
2 of her dresses are gone, and a travelling bag she kept in the closet.
How about money?
Well, she could have put some aside. I've always given her a fairly liberal housekeeping allowance.
Does she have any family? Anyone she might have turned to?
Not really. Parents are both dead. She's no brothers or sisters.
This is the very first time she's gone off like this?
Yes.
You've no cause to suspect there might be another man involved?
Well, hardly. I mean, she's not the type.
You happen to have a photograph of her?
Yes, as a matter of fact, I have. It's not a bad snap. I took it myself a few months ago.
That's very odd.
Odd?
I could be mistaken, of course, but I have a feeling I've seen her somewhere before. What is her maiden name?
Palmer.
Gloria Palmer. Oh, I can't say that rings any bells. Had you known her very long when you were married?
3 or 4 months. We met down at Torquay. We were both on holidays.
Her face is definitely familiar.
Well, possibly she reminds you of someone.
Yes, possibly. Okay, I wonder if you'll excuse me for a moment, would you? I'd very much like to have a word with my assistant.
Yes, certainly.
He's just in the next office. I shan't keep you very long. I'm sorry to bother you, Studdy. Something's come up, something rather curious.
Yeah?
Have a look at this photograph. See if you don't recognize the woman.
I know the face.
Can you place it?
Let me see now. I know it well. It's... Hey, where'd this come from?
I have a client in my office at the moment. It's his wife. She's left home.
No, it couldn't be.
Couldn't be what?
About 6 or 7 years back, we took a case. Dame left her husband and 4 kids. Remember, we had to drop it. We couldn't get a line on her at all. What was her name again? Oh, Wakehurst, was it, or Wakefield?
Wakefield! By heaven's, Study, I believe you've got it. It was Cora Wakefield. At the mention of the name Wakefield, it struck me at once. But was it possible that Gloria Bryant and Cora Wakefield, the woman who had deserted her husband and children some 6 years earlier, were one and the same? Without loss of time, I had Study dig out Cora Wakefield's file. Her photograph was attached, and when placed beside that of Gloria Bryant, it left very little room for doubt.
Yeah, it's her, Chief. A blind man could tell. Unless they're identical twins.
Cora Wakefield was an only child, and Mrs. Bryant as well.
Well, I guess that wraps it up, then.
I'm afraid our client's in for rather a nasty shock.
Yeah, not to mention Wakefield after all this time.
It's not so bad for him. He's her legal husband. That is, if he hasn't divorced her since. Which means the Bryant children, of course, are illegitimate.
Maybe he has divorced her.
Their study takes time to get a divorce, and she's been married, so to speak, to Bryant for at least 5 years now.
So we got a case of bigamy on our hands, huh?
Yes, it would seem so.
You gonna tell Bryant?
First, I think it might be an idea if you got in touch with Wakefield. If he definitely identifies her, we shall have no option.
Uh-huh.
The address down here is Chambers Road, Streatham, number 19. At the Streatham address, Study was informed that Henry Wakefield had sold the house some 3 years earlier and had taken his children to live with their grandmother at number 38 Camberwell Parade, Croydon. There he duly questioned the aging Mrs. Wakefield, who in turn directed him to her son's office in the city.
Well, Mr. Study, this is a surprise.
Yeah, I figured it might be. How's the carrying business?
Busy as ever. I've expanded a good deal since I last saw you. How long would it be now? 5 years?
Yeah, about that.
Yeah. Wait a bit. Don't tell me you've finally traced Cora.
Well, not exactly, but the trail's getting warmer.
You boys don't give up easy, do you?
I'll be quite frank with you, Mr. Wakefield. While your wife may be involved, I'm here in connection with an entirely different case.
Oh?
She is still your wife, is she? You haven't divorced her?
No, I haven't divorced her. I've toyed with the idea often enough, but, well, I just haven't got round to it.
Uh-huh. Well, take a look at this photograph.
It's her. It's Cora.
You're positive of that?
Oh, I should know my own wife, shouldn't I? Where'd you get it?
From a guy named Arthur Bryant.
Arthur Bryant?
Yeah, she went through a form of marriage with him in 1951.
Form of... But how could she? She's married to me.
Well, that didn't bother her, apparently. She might even be planning to try it again.
Try it again?
She walked out on Bryant 6 weeks ago. That's 2 husbands down, including yourself. Right now, she could be batting for number 3.
Henry Simon returns to continue this story in just a moment. And here again is Henry Simon.
There now appeared to be absolutely no doubt whatever that Cora Wakefield and Gloria Bryant were one and the same person, in which case Bryant's marriage was invalid and his children illegitimate. Accordingly, I acquainted him with the facts. Facts he at first refused to believe. When I had shown him the photograph of Cora Wakefield, however, he grimly submitted.
How could she do it, Mr. Simon? Tell me that. How could she do it?
That's a question I can't answer, I'm afraid. Bigamy's a messy enough business in itself. But when it happens to involve innocent children...
I'll kill her. I'll kill her, that's what I do. When I get my hands on her, I'll wring her neck.
That would hardly be a correct solution, Mr. Bryant.
Can you think of a better one?
Before a solution can be considered, she has to be found. Of course, I fully realize what a very dreadful blow this must be to you, but there's no earthly point at all in allowing your emotions to take possession of your judgment.
Oh, dear. No. You're quite right, of course. I'm sorry. It's just that... Oh, I had so much faith in her.
You say you met her while you were on holidays in Torquay.
Why, yes. We were both staying at the Cumberland Hotel there.
The Cumberland? Mm-hmm. And you hadn't known her before?
No, not at all.
You registered at the hotel as Gloria Palmer?
Yes, Miss Gloria Palmer.
And I think I remember you stating that you had known her for some months before you were married.
Yes, it was about 3. Although, actually,
Yeah?
I proposed to her before we left Torquay.
And she went back to London with you?
Yes, she had some rooms in Bayswater.
Did she happen to have a job of any kind?
No, as a matter of fact, she didn't. She told me that she'd been doing temporary work and that at the moment she was now between jobs.
Yeah?
And as we decided to get married, well, didn't seem much point in her taking another one. Instead, she spent her time looking at houses, flats, cottages, you know. Or when she found a house that suited, well, we just got married and moved in.
I see. Was it a church wedding or...
No, it wasn't. Registry office.
Ah, yes. Well, I think we'll leave it at that for the moment, Mr. Bryant. I'll just get you to jot down 1 or 2 more routine particulars, if you don't mind, and then we'll get cracking right away.
You know, there's one thing that puzzles me, though, Chief.
What's that?
The question of identification.
Mm-hmm.
You see, to get married, she'd need papers establishing her identity as Gloria Palmer.
False papers are very easy to come by, Study.
Oh, yeah, I know that, but you gotta know who to go to.
Obviously, she made it a business to find out, which wouldn't be very difficult. Soho's simply crawling with false identification vendors. For a few pounds, you can pick up her credentials that'd fool the Registrar General himself, if you wanted to. However, for the present, I'm not concerned with how she managed that side of it. I'm very much more interested in the fact that within a very few weeks of leaving Wakefield, she managed to find her way to the Cumberland Hotel in Torquay.
Well, so?
Doesn't it strike you as possible that she might have returned there?
Oh, you mean to the Cumberland?
Not necessarily to the Cumberland Hotel, but to Torquay. Having met with such very great success on her previous ventures there, it occurs to me that she might have been tempted to go back. Assuming, of course, that she's out to land another husband, that is.
Yeah. You really think she would try it again?
Well, why shouldn't she? Obviously, she left Wakefield because she was bored with her marriage. She had everything a wife could want. But that wasn't enough. She was tired of being the mother of 4 children. The first years had been fun. But the fun had turned to dullness and drudgery.
Oh, yeah.
And so she decided to find herself a brand new husband and start all over again. That's exactly what she did. Brian filled the bill admirably for a time, but eventually, of course, she found herself right back to where she'd been before, and so...
Yeah. The process is repeated, huh?
Exactly. She got away with it once. Why shouldn't she get away with it for a second time?
Well, you know, Chief, I suggested the same thing to Wakefield, but he didn't appreciate the joke.
I doubt if Bryant would either. But examined in the harsh light of fact, it's the only possible explanation for her behavior, isn't it?
Yeah, the circumstances are similar enough.
Oh, they are in every way. The whole thing conforms to a pattern. That's why I feel that a trip to Torquay might prove very fruitful. If Our Lady is just as much a creature of habit as she appears to be, then there's just a chance that you're going to pick up her trail. Unlike Study and Hunter, I very rarely place much faith in hunches, but this was an exception. To date, as far as we knew, Cora Wakefield had indulged in a repeat performance, so to speak, of her previous venture. After 5 years of marriage, she disappeared from her home while her husband was at work in just the same fashion as she'd done before, leaving no trace at all behind her. It wasn't very likely that she was going to return to the same hotel. But, of course, Torquay abounds in hotels, and she'd have had any number to choose from. Therefore, Study's job was to check with them all. And on the following day, on his arrival in the popular Devon Coast resort, he commenced his inquiries at the Cumberland.
Yes, sir. What can I do for you?
I'm trying to trace a woman who might have been a guest here sometime in the past 6 weeks.
Yes, sir?
Well, I'm not sure what name she'd have registered under, but I've got a photograph of her here someplace. There. You recognize her at all?
Can't say I do, sir. No, sir. She certainly didn't stay here. I make a point of getting to know all our guests by sight. Perhaps you should try the Conway Arms next door.
I'm sorry, sir. I can't help you. The Chatsworth's just down the road. Have you inquired there?
No, sir.
She certainly wasn't a guest here. So sorry.
One by one, Studdy worked his way along the line of hotels flanking the promenade. In all, he inquired at 11, before finally arriving at the Cambridge, which stood on the corner of Chalk Avenue and Heston Boulevard.
I've got a photograph of her here, if you'll just take a look at it, look it over.
Yes, why... Yes.
You mean you recognize her?
Yes, sir. Yeah, it's Miss Maitland.
You say Miss Maitland?
Yes. She was here for a fortnight last month. I got to know her quite well. She and Mr. Dorington both.
Mr. who?
Dorington. Yes. They were always together. I understand she went back to, Birmingham. Yes, that's Birmingham. She went back to Birmingham with him.
Back to Birmingham, eh? Ah.
Yes, sir. I wouldn't be sure, but rumour had it they were planning to be married.
Although he'd been vaguely expecting something of the kind, Studdy was rather taken aback by the hotel clerk's calm announcement. Unable to enlighten him any further, however, the latter referred him to his employer, one Malcolm Godfrey, who had managed the Cambridge for many years and who, it transpired, had befriended the man, Dorington, during his stay as a guest at the hotel.
Yes, that's right, sir. That's right, Mr. Studdy. Nice chap he was, too. Liked him very much.
Yeah. And Miss Maitland, did you get to know her at all?
I should say I did. Dashed attractive woman, that. Yes, should make him very happy.
It is true, then, that they were planning marriage.
Huh? Oh, I should say so. Took her back to Birmingham to meet his people, didn't I?
Yeah. And that was 3 weeks ago?
Yes, I should say about that.
Now, you wouldn't know his address in Birmingham, I suppose.
Yeah, as a matter of fact, I noted it down somewhere.
Oh, good.
Somewhere here. There you are. Yes, Rex Dorington, 81 Haverstock Road.
I'll jot that down, 81 Haverstock Road. Right, now, were they intending to be married right away?
I rather gathered that impression. As soon as they could be, that is.
Uh-huh.
Of course, these things usually take a few weeks, formalities and so forth.
Travelling overnight by train to Birmingham, Studdy arrived in that city at 7:10 the next morning. From the station, he took a cab to Haverstock Road, which was less than a mile away, alighting at the entrance to number 81, a narrow stone home which had been converted recently into 3 flats. The front door was open, and over the knocker was a card listing the names of the tenants and their flat numbers. Rex Dorington's was on the very top floor. It was flat 3.
Yes?
Mr. Dorington?
Yes, that's right.
I'm sorry to wake you up, but Studdy's the name. Missing Persons Bureau.
Dorington had on a dressing gown and slippers. His hair was tousled and his eyes were bleary. Rubbing a hand across his unshaven chin, he yawned again.
Pardon me, No, I was just climbing out of bed when the bell rang. Missing Persons Bureau, did you say?
Yes, that's right. I'm here in connection with a Miss Maitland.
Joy. What's happened? Is something wrong?
Is she here?
Here? No. No, she's in London. Or at least she would be by this time. I put her on the midnight train.
Oh. Do you expect her back?
Tonight? Why?
Well, a client of mine, in fact, 2 clients of mine, they're anxious to contact you.
Oh, what about?
I'll explain in a moment. First, I'd like to get the picture straight. You're not married to her yet, I take it.
No. No, not till next week. On the Friday, possibly.
Oh, that's something. What's she doing in London?
Oh, she had some things to pick up.
Including a new set of identification papers, maybe, huh?
Identification papers? I don't quite follow.
You will. You see, her name isn't Joyce Maitland. It's Cora Wakefield.
Cora Wakefield?
Mrs. Cora Wakefield.
I'm... Look here, is this some kind of joke?
No, it's no joke. And there's more to come. As well as having a valid husband and 4 legitimate children, she has an invalid husband and 2 illegitimate children. You can count your lucky stars, boy. You've had a narrow squeak.
Rex Dorington proved as difficult to convince as Arthur Bryant had been, but he, too, wilted under the pressure of facts as the truth was thrust upon him. It duly transpired that he'd arranged to meet Cora Wakefield, or Joyce Maitland as he knew her, at Birmingham Central Station upon her return from London that evening. Her train was due in at 8:20, and it arrived dead on time. But it wasn't Dorington who was there to greet her. It was a grim-faced Paul Studdy.
Miss Maitland?
Oh.
Dorington couldn't make it. He sent me along instead.
You're a friend of his?
The best friend he ever had. But we can talk about that on the train.
On the train?
Yeah, we're going back to London, Mrs. Wakefield. Or would you rather I made it Mrs. Bryant?
I don't know what you're talking about.
Don't you?
Take me to Rex at once.
He doesn't want to see you, but your 2 husbands do. That's why we're going back to London. So as not to disappoint him. Our train leaves from platform 5 in 10 minutes. Let's go, shall we?
Henry Simon returns to conclude this story in just a moment. And here again is Henry Simon.
Cora Wakefield was duly called upon to answer a charge of bigamy. Found guilty, she was sent to Holloway Prison for 12 months. Wakefield has since taken steps to divorce her. Bryant has married again. But unjust as it may seem under British law, his children remain illegitimate, thanks to a woman who wantonly used him as a means to her own heartless and selfish ends. And now, as always, this is Henry Simon inviting you to meet me here again, and for the present bidding you au revoir. This is Henry Simon, bringing you another story from my files here at the Missing Persons Bureau.
In these stories of the Missing Persons Bureau, dramatized for Henry Simon by Ross Napier, names and addresses have, for obvious reasons, been changed. In one moment, the search for Edmund Marshall, address unknown. And here again is Henry Simon.
Croydon Airport, June the 8th, 1953. A crowd of newspaper photographers and reporters had gathered at one end of the tarmac as a small single-seater monoplane touched down at the other, racing to a halt some 30 yards away. The group broke up, swarming towards it, as a solitary figure climbed out of the cockpit, his face smudged with grease, his dark hair swept back by the breeze.
Hold it right there, Eddie. Yes, let's have a big smile, Mr. Marshall. Hi, Eddie, look at the birdie. Yes, come on, see it.
Edmund Marshall was back in his homeland after 4 months of motor racing on the continent. He hadn't won a single race during that time, or for that matter, a place. In fact, he'd only finished in 4 races out of 18, and then well back in the field. But as the only son and heir of Sir Hilary Marshall, multimillionaire and textile magnate, his name was news, and his activities had been highlighted in every quarter of the globe. Here was a man who had no fear of death, who seemingly wished to die, yet who had everything possible to live for. Edmund Marshall, racing driver, stunt pilot, international adventurer.
What brings you home, Eddie? Old boy put his foot down.
Hey, low on funds, Eddie? Pocket money been cut, eh?
We understand, Mr. Marshall. No one could possibly exist on a mere $500 a week.
All right, boys, give it a break. I'm tired and want to clean up and get changed. Now, just run along, will you?
Let a man breathe some fresh air.
Hey, where's the old man, Eddie? Why isn't he here to meet you?
I wouldn't know.
Another bust-up, Eddie.
None of your business. Now get out of my way.
Oh, come on, Mr. Marshall.
Get that thing out of my face. Hey! You asked for it. Next man comes within swinging distance, I won't just bust his camera, I'll bust his face. Yes?
It's me, Eddie. Charlie Song.
Charlie! Come on in.
Hi, fella.
Great to see you, boy. I'll just keep this locked. In case any of those newspaper morons are still hanging around.
That Grimes from the Dispatch. He's pretty cheesed off about his camera. Says he's going to sue you for a new one.
If I had my way, I'd smash them all. I can't stand reporters. They bring me out in spots.
Oh, better go easy with them, Eddie. You don't want to get their backs up.
They haven't got backs, they're all neck. In any case, why should I worry? I'm immune to their slings and arrows.
Well, some of those same arrows are mighty sharp. They can penetrate a long way.
Not through my hide. As far as I'm concerned, they can write me up as they please.
It's your father I was thinking of.
That's who they were thinking of, too. I never know how close they were to the mark, either. Had we had another row, had I been ordered home at the point of a banknote.
Well, were you?
Yeah. He phoned me in Paris day before yesterday. Told me if I wasn't back by the end of the week, he'd stop my allowance.
Oh.
Once more, I have a horrible feeling he meant it.
Well, I can't say I blame him. You're his only son, Eddie. He thinks the moon shines out of you. It'd be the end of him if you went off and got yourself killed.
Haven't I ever told you? I'm indestructible. I lead a charmed life.
Look, Eddie, there's such a thing as having too much nerve, my boy. You turned over in your last 6 races.
7.
That Belgian one. I heard a description over the radio. The commentator was right on the spot. He practically read out an obituary. Said you didn't stand a chance of coming out of it alive. Also said it was your own fault.
So it was.
I know. I saw a newsreel of it later. You must have spun 50 feet in the air.
Flying without wings. You should try it sometime. It's quite a sensation.
Don't you feel anything, Eddie? Doesn't it make you, well, just a little bit shaky?
Surely. If it didn't, it wouldn't be any fun.
Fun?
I've called out of so many blazing wreckages, I've got Houdini turning cartwheels in his grave.
One of these days, you won't cry out.
So what? I wonder much about it, will I? Besides, who wants to die in a bed?
Sit down, Edmund.
I know what you're going to say, Dad. I've heard it all before. So why not save your breath and let's have a drink instead, eh?
I didn't send for you so we could have a drink. I sent for you because I've reached the end of my rope and my patience.
Yes, sir.
You're coming into the business with me.
Coming into the... Act your age, Dad. I'll send you bankrupt in a week. I've no head for business. I never will have.
Then you'll acquire one. If not...
If not.
Your allowance will cease forthwith.
You don't mean that, Dad.
I mean it as I've never meant anything more in my entire existence. When I die, you'll come into my money. I can't prevent that, and I have no wish to. But I've a good many years left yet. And while I live, you'll either do as I say, or you won't see a penny.
That sounds like an ultimatum.
It is.
You don't think I'm capable of getting by without you? Is that it?
I'm quite sure you're not.
Then the ultimatum becomes a challenge.
Call it what you will. You can give me your decision in the morning.
You needn't wait until then, Dad. You can have it now.
Well?
2 years ago in Heidelberg, I had an argument with a German fellow. I forget what it was about. I think I kissed his girl or some such. Anyway, he challenged me to a duel with swords. He was an expert. I'd never held a rapier before in my life, but I accepted. And the next day, by arrangement, we met in a paddock at the back of a church hall. His first thrust drew blood from a gash in my forehead. I still have the scar. However, that was it. We shook hands and went our separate ways. About 6 months later, I struck him again. In a bar in Munich, of all places. We had another argument. This time it was my turn to challenge him, so I did. But there was just one difference. During those 6 months, I'd made a point of becoming something of an expert with the sword myself. On the other hand, he'd become a little rusty, with the result that the positions were reversed, and the blood that flowed was his. I've never seen a man look so surprised.
A most interesting story, but I'm afraid I don't quite see the point.
Don't you, Dad? One of these days, you might be in for a similar surprise yourself.
That same evening, Edmund Marshall left his father's house, taking nothing with him except the clothes he stood up in. The old man never saw or heard from him again. 2 years later, he suffered a severe stroke, and on his deathbed held the following conversation with his lawyer, Felix Allerton, who was also one of his closest and most trusted friends.
Wherever the boy may be, Felix, I want you to give me your word. You'll seek him out. He's my sole beneficiary. No effort must be spared.
If he's alive, I'll find him. Rest assured of that.
When you do, tell him that I concede he may put down his sword.
For the Missing Persons Bureau, this story had its beginning on an afternoon in the September of 1955, when I was visited here in my office by solicitor Felix Allerton, a tall, spare man who explained that he'd been unable to find any trace at all of Edmund Marshall, but following the boy's discussion with his father and subsequent departure some 2 years before, he'd seemingly vanished from the face of the earth.
I've made inquiries everywhere, Mr. Simon. I've even advertised in the press to not the slightest avail. The boy's completely disappeared.
His friends haven't seen him?
No one has.
Odd for a young man who was so very much in the public eye to fade from sight altogether.
Particularly someone like Edmund. Incidents seem to follow him about. Incidents that more often than not resulted in newspaper headlines. He was totally irresponsible, didn't seem to care two raps what he did or how he did it, so long as there was an element of risk attached. And yet, he had definite strength of character, as he proved by cutting himself off so completely from his father.
Yes.
Despite their many differences of opinion, the old chap thought the world of him.
How old would he be now?
Just 28. I remember he was dead keen to get into the war. He came of age just a few days after peace was declared.
From the sound of him, he'd have made a natural soldier.
A trifle too natural.
What of his mother?
She died when he was only a lad. I've often thought it was largely because of that he turned out as he did. He badly needed the guidance of a maternal hand.
Did he have any romantic interests at all?
Oh, none of any consequence that I know of, although he was always a great one for the ladies.
Any particularly close friends?
About his closest, as far as I can ascertain, was a fellow named Soames, Charlie Soames. He's some sort of mechanic, has a job at Croydon Airport. As a matter of fact, I believe he used to look after Edmund's plane for him.
Well, what happened to that plane, by the way?
Well, it's still there in the hangar. Hasn't been touched since he arrived home from Paris to see his father. The same with his cars.
Cars?
Yes, he had two. The one he raced in and a sports model. Both of them are gathering dust in the garage. The racer was actually shipped home after he left. The old man took delivery. Although, oddly enough, he could never bring himself to sell it.
I expect he regarded it as something of a memento.
Possibly. Despite his forbidding exterior, he was always a sentimentalist at heart, especially where Edmund was concerned. It's a rotten shame, you know. He was puffing off like that without a chance to square the books. By all the rules and regulations, he should have lived at least another 20 years. Just goes to show. Barely a day's illness in his life, and he's dead at 64. Didn't smoke, didn't drink, took plenty of exercise. Makes you think young Edmund might have the secret of that. Eat, drink, and be merry. For tomorrow, we die.
Henry Simon returns to continue this story in just a moment. And here again is Henry Simon.
find a man of whom nothing has been seen or heard for over 2 years. Not an ordinary man, but one whose passion for dangerous living has made him something of a legend. That was the task which now confronted us, a task which to prove both difficult and intriguing. Following Allison's departure, I sent for Agent Bob Hunter, who is then in London, and with whom I discussed the various aspects of this case.
Yeah, these guys really get me, Chief.
Huh? What guys?
Well, the young marshal. Not a nerve in their bodies. Ran across a couple of them in the army. You know, madcap do-or-die types. Do things that curl a normal person's hair without so much as the flicker of an eyelid. They weren't just showing off, either. Just something inside them. Some sort of a driving force made them press on regardless. The crazy part of it was they usually came through unscathed.
Always says the man who hangs back who takes the biggest risks.
Yeah, well, I kind of sort of favored staying in between. You know what I mean? None of this hero stuff for me.
Know exactly what you mean. However, reverting back to the case in hand, I think perhaps this Charlie Soames might be well worth questioning.
Charlie? Oh, he's a mechanic guy.
That's right. Works at Croydon Airport. So it shouldn't be too difficult to get hold of. Here's a photograph of Marshall, by the way. And that's Soames with him, apparently.
Yeah. Buddies together, huh? Okay, Chief, I'm on my way.
Charlie Soames was a shortish man, stockily built, with thin, sandy hair receding at the temples, and a freckled countenance which blended with his fraying, oil-spattered overalls and the old Air Force beret which he wore from his head.
Yeah, that's right, Mr. Hunter. Eddie and I were pals for years. But don't ask me where he is now, because I haven't the faintest idea. I haven't set eyes on him since that day he got in from Paris. I remember there were about 50 reporters lined up to meet him. He smashed one of the photographer's cameras.
Oh, publicity shy, huh?
Well, you wouldn't think it the way his face was always in the papers, but he was. He hated being made a fuss of.
He came back from Paris to see his father, isn't it?
Yeah. Yes, he wasn't any too popular in that direction. What happened between them, I wouldn't know. I never saw either of them again.
Knew the old guy?
That I did. A whiter man you'd never hope to meet. He was hard, but he was fair. Always he had a good word for you. Yeah, too bad his dying so sudden. I didn't even know he was sick till I read about the funeral.
Tell me a little bit more about Eddie. Did he have many friends?
Not too many, no. No, he wasn't easy to get along with, unless you knew how to take him. He used to have these black moods, and nothing was ever right. Yet other times he was as meek and mild as a kitten.
What about his love life, or didn't he have one?
Oh, there was usually a girl in the picture somewhere. He had about a dozen in every city. It got so he couldn't remember their names.
Well, there wasn't anybody special?
Well, the only ones who ever meant anything to him were Linda and that Italian actress.
An Italian actress?
Yeah. I never met her, but he told me plenty about her. What was her name? Virago? Varesco, that was it. Alida Varesco. Allie, he called her.
Alida Varesco.
Yeah. She hung out in Rome somewhere. That's as much as I can tell you. I don't think she was any great star, but from what Eddie said, she used to do okay.
This other one, Linda, was it?
Linda Forrest. Oh, she was really the goods. He was teaching her to fly at one time. Used to bring her out here a lot. She caught on pretty quick, too.
So what happened to her?
Nothing that I know of. I suppose she's still around.
Their relationship didn't come to anything.
Oh, no. Linda was too sensible to get herself involved with someone like Eddie. She went out with him quite a bit, but that's where it stopped.
Yeah. How about his feelings?
Oh, he was pretty keen on her, but I don't think he was ever in love with her or anything like that. She was plenty of fun, and he liked being with her. Same with this Allie. Only I've got an idea she might have been more his way than he was hers. She was always writing to him.
From Rome?
Yeah.
Getting back to Linda, you wouldn't know where I could reach her, would you?
No, I don't know where she lived, but she worked for the Clarion.
The Evening Clarion?
Yes, she was a reporter of some kind.
I thought he didn't care for reporters.
She was the exception. He used to say she was the only one he ever met who never got personal.
At the offices of the Evening Clarion in Fleet Street, Hunter was told that Linda Forrest had left the Clarion some months before to join the staff of the Daily Gazette, which likewise had offices in Fleet Street, and where he duly caught up with her. A strikingly attractive brunette, slim and very well proportioned.
I'm afraid I can't tell you much more than you already know, Mr. Hunter.
Mm-hmm.
Edmund was Just one of those people you couldn't anticipate. He was here one minute and gone the next. Sometimes he'd be away for weeks, sometimes months. This time it's years.
You had no word from him at all?
Oh, not a line.
Well, you don't seem particularly put out.
Why should I? We're no more than good friends, and I hope we'll never be anything less. Well, I doubt that my husband will be too happy if I began seeing much of him again.
Your husband?
I've been married almost a year now. As a matter of fact, it was through Edmund I met Kim. They were at Harrow together.
Kim being your husband?
Kim Cheney, he's an architect.
Well, that rather places a different complexion, I think.
Rather, yes.
I don't suppose you ever mentioned knowing an Italian actress.
Ellie?
Yeah, that's her.
Oh, very sweet girl. I liked her immensely.
You actually met her?
Oh, when I was in Rome about 3 years ago. She had a small part in a play at the Andrea Doria. Edmund took me backstage, and we had quite a long chat, the three of us. Then later we went on to a party together at some film producer's home. No, it was a wonderful evening. We ended up at Ali's flat drinking some dreadful concoction that had absinthe in it. I forget what it was called, but, it surely was potent. The next morning I had a head the size of the Colosseum.
Yeah, you don't happen to recall the address, do you, of the flat?
Let me think. It was in the Via Fiordorelli. Quite a large block. It backed onto the Tiber, and there was a sort of supermarket place next door. Well, you couldn't miss it if you went there. It's about twice as high as any other building in the street, or it was then.
What was the setup exactly? I mean, ostensibly you were both Marshall's girlfriends. Would make things a little bit awkward?
Not at all. We got on famously. Oh, but let me set you straight. I was never Edmund's girlfriend. Our friendship was purely platonic.
Oh, I see. And what about the alley?
She adored him, fool that she was.
Why, didn't he return her feelings?
Well, he may have done. I wouldn't really know. But he wasn't the type to get serious about. Not for anyone who wanted to stay sane. A man who thinks it's funny to turn double somersaults in a racing car at 200 miles an hour is hardly a good bet for any woman.
Yeah, I see what you mean.
Mark you, there were occasions when it wasn't easy to maintain indifference toward him. He was an extremely fascinating person in more ways than one. No doubt in the world that if I'd relaxed my guard with him for an instant, I'd have fallen harder and faster than a lead weight from the dome of St. Paul's.
At 9:30 the following morning, Hunter boarded a plane for Rome, arriving in that city some 6 hours later, and proceeding from the airport by cab to the Via Fiordorelli, where he had very little trouble in locating the block of flats in question. A 10-story building backed by the Tiber, and flanked on one side by a supermarket and on the other by a war memorial. In the foyer was an inquiry or service desk, and behind it, reading a newspaper, sat an elderly, graying-haired man.
Pardon me.
Desidera qualche cosa, signor?
Oi, Robert, my boy, here's your big opportunity. Signorina Alida Varesco, sta qua?
Sì, signor. Piano 8, appartamento 43.
Doing a little great. Could you give me that a little slower? Più lento, per favore.
Appartamento 43. Piano 8.
You know what? 8-4. Piano 8, yeah.
Appartamento 43.
Flat 40. 40?
3.
Ah, 43. 43.
Sì, 43.
She was a tall, raven-haired girl with full scarlet lips and a milk-white complexion. Her eyes were large, set wide apart, and she was dressed in a blue satin house gown, the hem of which brushed the floor as she ushered the agent into a tastefully furnished drawing room, addressing him in excellent English as she did so.
Make yourself comfortable, Signor Hunter. Can I offer you a drink?
No, thank you. Oh, I'd sell for one of the nuts, if I may.
Please do. They're fresh from the market today.
Thank you.
So, you are looking for Eddie?
That's right. I thought maybe you might have heard from him.
You are his father?
No, his father's dead.
Oh,
Suffered a sudden stroke a month or so back.
Donna mia, ma questo è terribile.
Yeah.
Oh, it will be a bad shock to Eddie.
Do you know where he is?
If you will give me time to change, I will take you to him.
Take me to him?
The hospital is not far from here.
Hospital?
Oh, but of course, you would not know. There was an accident. He was badly injured.
Well, what kind of accident? When?
He was working as a flyer with Adolfo's air circus.
An air circus?
His plane crashed. It is a miracle he is still alive. But the miracle, I think, is not a good one.
What do you mean?
His legs, both of them, they are gone.
En route to Rome's Garibaldi Hospital on the fringe of the Villa Borghese, Elliot told Hunter how Edmund Marshall had come to Rome shortly after the break with his father, of the various jobs which he'd held during the previous 2 years, and finally of the disaster that had overcome him, a disaster which had culminated in the amputation of his legs and left him a helpless cripple for life.
We're short of chairs, Mr. Hunter. Rest on the end of the bed, will you? You too, Ellie. There's plenty of room. After all, I'm only half here.
Eddie, please.
So the old boy's dead, eh? He didn't live as long as he thought he would. The old... He used to tell me he'd live to be 100. You know, I thought he would. Why didn't someone send for me? And why wasn't I told?
Nobody knew where you were. There wouldn't have been time anyway. It was all over pretty quickly.
Just think, for 4 months, I've been lying here on my back, wanting to die, not knowing how, and he goes and beats me to it.
Oh, you're a long way from dying yet.
Don't you be too sure of that.
Look, you've never turned your back on a challenge before. Let's just start now. This is it, Eddie, the supreme challenge. Your father died believing you'd proved yourself ready to take over where you left off, but he was wrong. To date, you haven't proved a thing. Oh, sure, you managed to get by without him for 2 years. You made him eat his words. But if he was alive, there's no saying they wouldn't catch in his throat. You'd still have to make him swallow them.
Henry Simon returns to conclude this story in just a moment. And here again is Henry Simon.
A further 4 months went by before Edmund Marshall finally returned to London to take over the reins of his father's business. It was his own decision so to do, and he's since proved himself more than worthy of the task. Aided, I might add, by Ali Davaresco, who is now his wife. And now, as always, this is Henry Simon, inviting you to meet me here again, and for the present bidding you au revoir.